On this special episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, recorded live at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference, we interview some of the speakers and discuss recent activities for the association and the benefits of membership in the association.
Welcome to the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, the longest-running podcast specifically focused on the freestanding ambulatory surgery industry. We would like to thank our sponsor, Surgical Information Systems, providing cutting-edge information solutions for surgery providers. Trivalence. Trivalence offers a comprehensive next-generation ASC solution that optimizes payment and supply chain performance, enabling actionable data insights. MedServe, which is the only digital narcotic cabinet specifically designed and priced for surgery centers, helping standardize processes and compliance, eliminate paper logs, and prevent drug diversion. And Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, the nation's leading regulatory and accreditation compliance resource for ambulatory surgery centers. For more information about our sponsors, visit our website at ascpodcast.com.
Welcome to episode 230 of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle for September 18th, 2024, recording from the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference in Albany, New York, and from our studios in Spencerport, New York. This is Sue Cronkite, the co-host of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle and Operations Manager for Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies. We'd like to remind our listeners that the ASC regulatory environment is a rapidly evolving landscape, and the material presented in this episode is based on the most current information available as of the date of recording. As such, it's important to recognize that this information may be subject to change, and we advise all ASCs to stay up to date with the latest regulations and guidelines issued by the relevant regulatory bodies. And joining me today is John Goehle, the owner of Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, and one of the most respected experts in the ambulatory surgery industry. With over 30 years of experience, Mr. Goehle has authored over 10 books on the ASC industry, and he is a sought-after speaker on regulatory accreditation and finance issues.
So we're about a week out from the conference, and it was last week. We're recording on a Monday after the conference is over. We had some problems with the recording, so right before we get into things, we're going to apologize for some of that, and that's what's really taken some time. A lot of tedious work with Sue there trying to equalize all the sounds coming off the microphones.
It didn't come out perfect, so
yeah,
I think you'll at least be able to hear everybody, but there's a little bit of an uneven sound to it.
Well, and really what it was, Sue, is I had two microphones that weren't working well.
Yeah.
And so anytime we had more than two people speaking, that's when the issue arose. So, again, I think you did a good job in trying to work with what I gave you, but we do apologize ahead of time. It was a great conference, though, wasn't it? I enjoyed the venue, which was the Desmond Hotel, which, by the way, Sue, I've been going to the Desmond for over 30 years. It's gone through a lot of changes over those years. But the funny thing is that we actually we used the Desmond back in the 90s when New York State Association was young. And I guess I should point out that I'm one of the founders of the New York State Association. So I've been with them for, over 30 years.
I wasn't involved that far back, but
Right.
It's a beautiful place now. I love the venue.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of great speakers, and the interviews turned out great. A lot of good information. So.
That's right. And we had our full crew, or at least as many of our staff as we could. This is also the venue that we use at the time of the year that we use to hold our annual meeting of our New York State clients. So we had a great attendance there. We had about, I think, 12 or 13 of our employees there in attendance, as well as a booth. And one of the things that we did with this conference is we did interview two of the vendors. We know that we have vendors vendors that listen to our podcast. So I thought it might be useful to talk to some experienced vendors to talk a little bit about the experience of being a vendor at these state association meetings and the expectations. And I also want to point out that we enjoy doing these special episodes for our state associations. So if you are a board member or an executive director for a state association and you haven't been in touch with us, we would be glad to consider doing a special episode from your conference. So just reach out to us at info@ascpodcast.com. And with that, let's start getting into the various interviews. The first one was with John Van Valkenburg, the president of the New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers, and Jeffrey Flynn, who is the vice president. Though I should say, after this interview occurred, Jeffrey became the president and John stepped down. He actually has become a member of the ASCA board. So let's listen to that interview. I'm here at the 2024 annual New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers conference here in Albany at the Desmond, and I'm here with my dear friends, the president and the vice president of the New York Association here, John Van Valkenburg, who's also with Upstate Orthopedic Ambulatory Surgery Center, and Jeff Flynn with Gramercy Surgery Center. He's the vice president, but you have some news, don't you?
Yes, I do. John has decided not to run for re-election as he's been elected to the ASCA board. I'm actually the new president.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I did vote for you, by the way. Just want you to know. Well, it was unanimous. Because anybody but me is what it was. Remember when I left the room, I said, I'm leaving, but there's no more positions to be appointed here.
I saw that, yeah.
We have a reputation of actually picking on people that leave. This has been a fantastic conference. And it was funny. You and I spoke this morning, before the conference started, and I said, I forgot today was the first day of the conference. You and I have been here since Sunday.
Yeah.
We've been working since Sunday. We have met hundreds of people, in that amount of time, had incredible conversations even before the conference started. That's what these conferences are all about.
Yeah, it's absolutely about the networking. Networking, the ties to see people learning new things.
Right.
90% of the people that come to this conference are in a silo. This is the only conference they're coming to. So it's the opportunity we need to present to them the information they need to know from a regulatory standpoint, what's out there, but to present what the future is for hope to them as they go back to their centers. But also from the exhibitors, it's very crucial because that's how we learn from them. What's out there and what's available.
What's the new technology that's coming down the pipe?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you put together a great conference. Of course, we've worked together. I was on the education committee. You work on the conference committee. It's a little confusing. I'm not going to describe to the poor audience out there how those things interact. But it shows that it takes a lot of people, to pull together something this big.
Oh, a team effort, because you've got to make sure your breakout sessions are of quality, which the education committee has delivered time and time again. We added an additional breakout session because we recognized we didn't have enough last year. So the number of exhibitors, the number of attendees is the greatest that we've ever had. So we really are thrilled about how this conference has gone.
And there hadn't been so many problems yet. We had one of our speakers, unfortunately, had to bow out because he was in the hospital. But we were able to quickly find some people to step in and fill in for him.
And actually, one of our other speakers had to rush into surgery today to do surgery. So, but we certainly had a replacement there too.
We did, and on a dime.
Stress-free.
It was not a problem finding that. Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm going to say that, but it might have been stress-free to you, Jeffrey, but behind the scenes it was different. But talk a little bit about what we're up to over the next year. Let's talk about the conference. Then I'm going to talk to John about what's going on in the organization. So, but eventually I'm going to have to switch to you about that. So, but go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I think just coming up in the next year, one of the things is we want to make ourselves relevant in the day in and day out centers. I think one of the things we're about to do, and it's a surprise to talk to you about, is we also created Lisa Altieri, the executive director of the association, which kind of she's been in that role serving it. We've just given her the title. October 14th to October 18th, Lisa and I are going to take a tour around the state of ambulatory surgery centers, trying to get in touch. We really want to get in there, but we also want to talk to the owners of the centers, the medical directors, to really show, they remember going up in front of the FIPIC Council. Well, now there's going to be somebody there that's defending
friendly
them.
Voice, friendly face,
And I just want to see us do other things. There's another initiative which John started with benchmarking, the national reporting of it, really charging the quality committee to implement that here. great speaker we have tomorrow is the Executive Director of California, Beth LeBoyer.
Yeah.
And she actually met with our Quality Committee today to exactly show how California did it. And so hopefully those are things implemented. If we can turn around and deliver benchmarking for our members, for their membership fee, that really does show a value as to why many more members should be involved with us going in the future.
And I should point out that what we're referring to is a website called ASCquality.org. By the way, they have a lot of great benchmarking data. You don't have to be a member of a state association or participate in it to download the data, compare that data against your own. But what we're talking about is taking that extra step of saying that we're going to be part of the submission of this data. So our information, that's what's happening in New York, is now going to become part of that large database out there.
Exactly.
So
and that was something from when we were at the ASCA conference. John saw it, and really we pushed forward that we want to put this in place now.
So let's talk a little bit about our upcoming conference. I believe we actually have the date for 2025 already.
It's in October. It's in the first week in October next year.
Okay.
And that's already been set up. So the thing is, we're right back here
to Desmond. Yeah.
Desmond has treated us so well.
Yeah.
They really have. And they've jumped ahead on getting towards problems, solving them quickly.
Yep.
And it's just been a real pleasure dealing with the staff here.
All right, and nothing ever goes totally smoothly when it comes to these events, but they've really done a great job, and we really appreciate all the hard work, and especially
they have.
Yeah,
we've been here the last several years, and they've done a great job, and we've grown. I think, to be honest, the only concern that I have right now is if we keep growing as a conference at the rate we have, I'm not sure that they have. We've already kind of maxed out what they have for exhibitors, and our general session room is bursting at the seams. Which, again, these are all great things, like you mentioned. This is our registration numbers are higher than they've ever been. Almost 140 registered attendees. Our exhibitor and sponsor numbers are higher than they've ever been. I mean, this is just in the feedback we've gotten so far. I mean, this is a great conference, and credit to the education committee, credit to the program committee for putting this together. I mean, we've been doing this. Obviously we've been working hard on this for since 2018, and coming up with a new product, an improved conference product. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I feel like we've gotten pretty good at it. We're
absolutely
the secret sauce. We finally found the secret sauce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to continue to do that and continue to make it better. So, and to that point, we already have next year scheduled.
That's right.
Whatever the date is. But
and I chair the education committee. We will start. We're looking for new members, by the way. If you're listening to this and you're interested in helping us, or if you're not here at the conference because there are things that you want to hear us talk about, but that's your opportunity. Call me up. Send an email to info@ASC Podcast or send one to the New York State Association. We'd be glad to match you up, because that's how we have decided what programs we put on here, is the feedback that we get from our audience.
Oh, absolutely. And you were saying before on the panel earlier that you attend so many different state associations, but this year's state association New York meeting blew
everybody away. Now, in all fairness to Beth, who the executive director for California, I did not get to California this year. I'm sure they're bigger than us, but they have a leg up on us in the number of surgery centers out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But what I also pointed out is that when we consider the percentage of surgery centers represented here, I mean, I don't have hard data, but I guarantee you, just looking out that audience, we have a very high percentage of the surgery centers in New York represented, more so than I've seen in other places. And the other thing, and I know we've all seen this, there are more than one person. I mean, we have a couple of our clients are here with 4 people. We've got 13 people, ourselves. Yeah, I don't know how they do it. Though I've caught them in corners every once in a while, solving problems at their surgery centers. But that's a lot. I mean, a lot of conferences I go to, they're lucky if they get one person to it, let alone 3 or 4 people from that.
I think that's just a testament to, and again, I think part of the reason why this has grown is because the experience that our members have had, that our attendees have had, that it's word of mouth, right? Everybody says, like, that was a great conference.
Yeah, that's right.
And everybody's like, well, I got to go next year. In fact, or somebody comes here and they're like, wow, that was a great conference. I got to bring,
more people.
My managers. I got to bring some other people from my facility, because it was worth the time. I mean, the biggest thing is the time, right? I mean, obviously there's some, the travel is, luckily we put this conference in a centrally located place.
Yeah.
So the travel expenses are hopefully minimal.
Says the guy from Syracuse, not from Buffalo, has it centrally located. It's all relative.
But again, the biggest commitment to coming to a conference is time.
Yeah, that's right.
Time away. I mean, that's everything. I always have to consider that as a surgery center administrator. If I'm going to go to an event, I mean, it means that I'm not in my center. It means that I'm not doing my job. And
we know Murphy's Law means there's probably some surveyor is going to be showing up tomorrow.
Fingers crossed. But but the time commitment. So is it worth your time? Is it worth your time being away from your surgery center to be here? And I think, our numbers as far as the attendees and the feedback we've gotten from people it is absolutely worth their time. There's a lot of conferences out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity to go to them. So you have to pick and choose. What is going to be worth your time to attend.
Right.
And I'm really happy and I'm proud of this organization that people have shown and have demonstrated that they feel this is worth their time and that this is a great conference to come to. And I couldn't agree with them more.
Well, and to that point, it's a reasonably priced one too. I got to admit, I don't know what we charge, but I know people do not complain about the price. How much is it to?
So for members, it depends. We did run some specials, but with the early bird special was $450 for the first attendee and $350 for any additional attendee from the same organization.
Right.
That was the early bird price. The regular price was $475 and $375. Non-members, it was a little bit higher at $575, but again, for what you're getting, and again, and not just what you're getting, it's compared to other conferences too. I mean, there's a lot being offered by way of meals. I mean, we had breakfast today, lunch today, dinner today, breakfast tomorrow. So
I know I've been telling everybody that I'm going to give them a free dinner tonight.
You'll get your money's worth.
That's right. You absolutely food alone, absolutely.
$475. Yeah, you'll get your money's worth just in food and beverage.
And do not minimize, as we talked about, that the things that happen outside of the sessions themselves, because that interaction you had, the friends you're going to meet, the contacts that you're going to have, the people you're going to be able to do informal benchmarking with will be valuable. So, John, you have been very active. You are ending an incredible run. Unfortunately, it was, I'm not going to say marred, because it really is where you came into your prime, during the pandemic, and where the organization itself came into its prime, I think. But you've been through, I was a president for 4 years. You've, beat that, pretty handily, and you've been through a very difficult time. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced, and your biggest, the thing that you're most proud about?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges have been big. I was president for 6 years, and I came into an organization that was had become a little bit disorganized.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There was some fission happening, fission, I guess.
Yeah,
But, between the upstate and the downstate, and really what we were looking to do was try and bring everybody together. And I think, to answer your question, that's what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of it. I really feel that we have brought everybody together. I mean, it feels like a community in a way that 6 years ago, if you look at 6 years ago and now, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
It's like night and day. And the challenge, and obviously we've faced a lot of challenges in the last 6 years. COVID being one of the big ones. But everything since then, and really just maturing as an organization, and coming together as a group, and coming together as a community, and CHC's been a big part of that. Capital Health Consulting has really helped us, become more of a community, because that's how we feel. It's amazing that I truly feel in solidarity with all these other surgery centers, and more recently there's been other challenges too. Obviously, thankfully we've kind of moved on past COVID a little bit, but now anesthesia challenges, and the list, the challenges have actually only grown. This when I came into my position as a surgery center administrator 14 years ago, and my president in this organization, it was easier.
Yeah.
It's become more difficult to be an administrator. It's become more difficult to be a leader of an ASC. And the opportunities are huge, but it has become harder. And more now than ever before, it's really important that we can rely on each other to support each other and to make sure we're furthering our goal in really increasing access to healthcare in this state and beyond, and also increasing the quality. And I really think we've done a lot towards that end, and people are noticing. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, one of the things I have to say, John, your greatest legacy is going to be you have united everybody. And as these challenges go on, the easier part of all these challenges, like I remember we were in Washington talking about anesthesia, is we're all facing them together now.
That's right.
It's not as an individual centers. It's not, we're facing it as a team. And it was only after you uniting the organization and bringing it forth. And that really is something you deserve a tremendous amount of credit for.
And for those that are not aware, or even people that are listening from other states, there's a vast difference between the needs of the city versus the needs of a lot of the people in upstate. I mean, we come together because we're all providing high quality care. That there's no difference there. But to bring these organizations, when I founded the organization in 1991. We had two organizations. We had a downstate group, we had an upstate group, and my job was to bring them all together at that point. I remember that. That was difficult in 1991, and of course it didn't stick. It never really was easy in the beginning, let alone, what happened, 30 years later when, there were even bigger challenges. So indeed, I agree with you. That's been an incredible legacy, and something that you're going to be challenged. I'm looking at Jeffrey now. To continue. You've got things aren't any easier as John indicated. Now, where are you heading?
John's not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a very good point.
I think we can also, as now that John's on the ASCA board, I think there's certain things that we can start to work. One of the great things that's about to happen at this conference for the first time ever, we have the Texas Executive Director, the California Executive Director, the Treasurer of the state of Massachusetts here. And we're talking about our issues together. So now it's important that we see where we fall into situations. California is fighting the fight to get the cardiac codes approved that CMS approves. They've been at it a lot longer than us. We have learned from them. So that's one factor to go forward. Texas has allowed them for a while. We can learn from them and what they go. Massachusetts faces the same situation we do, so we can work with them. So I think the aspect is we can further build that community by working with other states, and obviously with John, with bringing in ASCA to work with us on those situations. So I actually, you all know that I'm the optimist with ASC. As I always say, I drink the ASC Kool-Aid. But I really think that the positive things in the future there, I just would like to, I think we're going to increase our membership by getting out to some of those. And we've talked a little bit about helping the rank and file, that it's not just something. If we start getting videos for our members on the website. So they have an orientation program for something. They have a infection control instruction for something that they can use as an in-service, as opposed to start looking at, what do I have to purchase? What do I have to bring out? No, I'm a member of the state association, and the education department, the education committee of the state association has developed this particular thing. So I think now it's a time to really be more relevant in the day in and day out centers. Will make us stronger, I think, especially with the state health department. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's been a big benefit too during these sessions, to be able to hear directly from them as to where they're heading and what they think about us, which is very good stuff. I mean, they believe.
The most amazing thing is that we had the commissioner of the New York State Department of Health be our keynote speaker.
Absolutely.
When
did a great job.
I think that was going to happen?
And he's funny too.
Yes, he is. He's very funny.
So let's talk about the benefits of membership, because it's important that we continue to grow. We have a very good representation across the state, but it's still not everybody, So what do we do, John, on that?
Yeah, here's the thing. And again, I think people who've come to this event have understood, and people that are members have understood. And if you're not, come to the event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The barriers to being a member are low. Our annual dues are low, $750 for a facility. That might be changing next year. We'll see. But again, relatively low, and it's important because it's tough. I mean, you're a little bit on an island. Being a surgery center administrator, nurse manager, leader in a surgery center, and being a part of this is really being a part of something that's important. And I don't think there's a person that you could ask that's a member that would say that they don't value their membership, that they don't find their membership is important. Our retention rate is extremely high.
Yeah. And if you don't rejoin, it's probably because you forgot you didn't look in your mail recently. So usually we can correct it pretty quickly.
And I mean, I got to be honest with you. Here's been the thing over the last few years, and a challenge for us. Where to your point with some of the retention issues is there's been a lot of turnover.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A lot of turnover.
Yeah.
A lot of the leadership of surgery centers are green.
Yeah.
They're green. Yeah. They're new to this role. They're new.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, especially those people, it's just amazing how being a part of the community, how it can help you in your day-to-day role in your day-to-day job as being surgery center administrators. Because I'll tell you what, I mean, it's one thing, and I value it highly. I do it. I email, I pick up the phone, I call my fellow administrators. I call Jeff, I call people, in the central New York area. People that maybe in a traditional sense you would consider competitors. Yeah, it does not feel that way at all.
Right.
I reach out to them and we talk about things. Are they struggling with whatever? Where are there? One thing we're going to look at now is benchmarking compensation for staff, because that's become a challenge. We've seen that number grow on our P&Ls tremendously.
John is an accountant, by the way. He knew which statement it was.
So and again, we there's a lot of comfort and there's a lot of value in that community. So.
And that tends to be, by the way, in the state associations we work with, that tends to be the most popular survey that is done every year or 2 years. Usually they do it every 2 years. So, So what are some of the other benefits of membership here that are valuable to our members?
I think it's the camaraderie together, but also one of the things we're going to do is an initiative going forth. One great story from this conference, there are 2 people from a surgery center who are on the FIPIC agenda for next month. Yeah. So they're not even created and open at this point. The 2 of them are blown away about where they're going to get information from, just that information about, we're in that situation. They walked up there and they found the resources, right? And they walked through this and just said they're so happy they were here. They cannot believe that all the resources of what they might need and know, they can meet here.
That's right, one place.
And I think we have to start getting people, as they get their CON approved, to really start seeing the organization as a resource to go forth to make it grow. I also think we need to, the other membership benefits is just to be able to call somebody else up and to be able to borrow something. That's one of the things that it's one of those things within the area. Because this organization has really become a community. I think it was a lot during COVID.
Right.
As we had our daily phone call of what was fact and fiction, and people joined in on it, that you started saying, that person's there. Well, I feel more comfortable. I can call that person up and say, hey, I just ran out of this. Do you have it? And can I borrow it? And I'll give it, and it's just one of those things that are just, it really does make you feel like you're. And somebody did that to me yesterday. A center that on 60th Street called me up and said, or last week called me up and said, oh my God, we need this for a case that's tomorrow. What can happen? I said, well, let me ask my materials people. And I said, well, we have it. He said, but you just, and then of course they brought it down. But I got to tell you, the owner of that surgery center sent me this text as if, oh my God, I can't believe you just offered that to us. It was like, I want to know that I can call up and get the same thing back. That's right. So that's it. And so we really have made that community. And so I can't emphasize that enough, that we really can get the issue, or being able to call up, getting an issue out of the blue. Yeah. That I can call, especially the 2 of you. I can call one of you and say, have you ever had this happen? And but also know that that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be like, no, Jeff, it's only happened here.
That's right. We have a lot of those conversations.
And that, so that's one of the things that not in the camaraderie in the organization, but the trust and confidence that we have with each other as to how to handle things really has been a great benefit of the organization.
And another benefit of the organization is the benefit to the organization of members, of more members. The more members we have, the stronger we are as an organization, which provides more benefit to our members. Right? So, I mean, that's the value in growth. And that's what, everybody that's a member and who's not a member needs to understand. And that's the importance of it. The importance of it is that there's strength in numbers. And by, if we have every surgery center in New York State be a member of this organization, we are that much more powerful and more influential in we can add more value.
And we could be speaking as one voice, truly one voice.
One voice. That's very important. Speaking as one voice, especially on some of these issues that we're going in front, especially as I said, the CMS cardiac approved procedures that we're not allowed to do now. We heard today, we want this information to make sure they're safe. Well, prime example, sitting down, other information that's being given to us by other states is the information has already been proven. Here's the study here, and here's the study there, and it's
just get those wheels moving faster. So it doesn't end today or tomorrow. At the end of the conference, we got a lot of other activities going on. We talk bi-weekly with our membership, right? Talk about that, John.
Yeah, we talk bi-weekly with our membership. Every other Friday, we have a legislative update call. Really, that's just an opportunity just to give an update to everybody what's going on.
We probably should relabel it because it's not just a legislative update.
We should just call it a bi-weekly membership call.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, what it does is what it started out as was the legislative update call, but really it's just kind of an update. Here's where we're at as an organization. Here's what's going on. Here's some information. Have you seen the cost report? The software has been released.
By the way, it has been released, everybody that's out there, and you need the deadlines.
In New York State,
that's right.
The deadline is in
December.
So you should start working at it now. But here's what people are hearing. In different parts of the state.
And we do it by Zoom. It's all virtual. We do it by Zoom every Friday, and everybody can speak up.
And it's well participated. And then in addition to that, we've also, the Administrators Club has been something that our membership committee, an initiative that they put together, which is an opportunity quarterly to get together in a much more, kind of more in an open forum type of situation where everybody can participate. We just had our most recent one last week. It was very well received. We've been doing it for a while. We took some feedback from our members to see, hey, what's the best day? What's the best time to set aside 1 hour, out of your schedule to just get on a conference call with other members, with other ASC leaders, and talk about a topic. What are you struggling with? What successes have you had? What have you found that has been able to help you that others could use that information or use some of those ideas, and I found that to be incredibly valuable.
And we're starting to see some collaboration. As you said, you're going to bring a couple other states here to talk. Where New York is one of the 8 states that's participating together with the multi-state conference, and it's a free benefit. 2 full days of virtual conferences. None of them really are overlapping with what we had here. A little bit, some sessions where we're going into a little bit more depth than we were able to do here because we could do 2-hour sessions virtually. So if you're a member, you get free access to that. By the way, keep in mind that you can get all of the credits you need at the state association here to keep up your AEUs for the CASC and the CAPE.
CASC and that, and I got to tell you, that conference last year, I'm panicking in December, looking for what credit I didn't get, and let me tell you, you surprised me last year, John. I said in November, I said, oh my God, I had too many credits.
That's right.
Yes, lots of opportunities.
It was
lots of opportunities. And again, you don't have, your membership fee covers a lot of this. Of course, attendance here costs money, but it's a very reasonable price to be able to put together both the live conference and the virtual conference to get all the credits that you need. And more importantly, all the education you need to really have.
And absolutely, and that's the great opportunity, with the virtual conference, it is tough. It is tough in a lot of these centers to get everybody out to the conference, to get everybody out of there because, somebody's got to be, watching what's going on. You do need leadership representation in your facility. So it's tough to drag everybody out. So that's where the virtual offerings offer a nice opportunity to get some more people in your facility.
That probably would never be able to get out.
And to get the AEUs, without having to tag and trade off who gets to come.
Yeah, that's right. As always, it's been a great pleasure. I can't believe how long we've been talking here. This is going to be the longest interview, I think, of all the interviews that we're doing here. But thank you so much for everything you do, and what a great conference here. Thank you for facilitating, Jeff, all the speakers that are going to be interviewed for this. This will be a great special edition. So,
and we'd be remiss if we didn't thank you, John, for everything that Ambulatory Healthcare Strategy does, and through the year, what the podcast is really giving the information to people. It really has been a strong proponent to allow New York to grow, so we really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
And next, the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers, Lisa Altieri, spoke about her activities over the last year and the activities of the association, especially when it comes to working with the Department of Health and working with, the politicians in Albany.
I'm here with my good friend, Lisa Altieri, and we're at the end of the conference. We're both like looking at each other, exhausted here. And I'm just going to tell my audience, I literally blanked when I was about to introduce her name. By the way, I've done the same thing with Sue, so they know that happened. But anyway, Lisa, thank you for everything you do for this association. I was on the board when we brought you on board. You talked earlier about you don't know why you got picked. Well, trust me, someday when we're drinking, I will tell you the reasons. But it was very apparent right from the very beginning that there was no contest. It was a unanimous vote, because we knew that what you brought to the table was far more than anybody else. And of course, you've proven it. In the 6 years you've been with us?
I started officially in 2019.
Yeah.
And we had our first Department of Health person there
That's
from a long time ago.
Oh, you brought great value to the organization. We've come a long way, and I'm so proud of what we are today. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the needs of this organization from our membership. We talked earlier with John and Jeffrey about how to become a member, the benefits of membership. But it's a two-way street. We want you to join and we want to give you things, but we need stuff back from you. So talk a little bit about what we need from them.
Well, first of all, I can't say enough about this association. I'm amazed by the community that has been built over the last few years. I'm proud to now be the executive director. Yeah. But what I'm really thrilled about is that this board has stood up and really engaged membership.
Yeah.
And we're trying to engage more.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes this association so special, and other states are seeing it, even at the national level, is that we have a true community. And the needs of individual ambulatory surgery centers, we want to understand those needs. Mm-hmm. We want to have them invite legislators in to see what they do, to talk succinctly about their sticking points and their pain points. And so one of the things that we really asked a lot of folks today was, would you be willing to share your story, be part of the legislative committee, be part of the education committee, plug for you, be part of the new veterans committee, be part of the conference committee.
A quality committee, too. We really need help there.
The quality committee is something that I actually am really, really especially excited about. But it's a hard committee to get started, and you need the time to do it. And our board members all have full-time jobs.
Right.
So we're looking for folks that are willing, that really, if it's a part of their skill set, that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
We're welcoming everyone to reach out and try to see if there's a place for them on some of these committees.
And let's point out that we have great technology nowadays. This is not the burden that it used to be, where you had to travel to Albany, travel to Syracuse, whatever, in order to meet up. We can do these meetings, and we do not ask too much of your time. I mean, it's a dangerous thing to say, because it's all perception, I think. Yeah. But on the other side, I think we're very, and the more the merrier. The more people that are participating, the less of a burden it's going to be on all of us. But we need everybody's feedback.
Right. I mean, some of the things that come up that you hit with surveyor questions that get, at the ambulatory surgery level. Yeah. I have daily conversations with the Department of Health. Yeah. So we also have to make sure we're all communicating so we can get all those issues up to Stephanie Schulman, right? Yeah. But on top of that, there's sometimes subtleties when we're just discussing legislation or regulatory changes that, because we live in this area, a lot of the board members, we all talk about it on a daily basis. The nuances of that may be seen through a different lens by some of the folks, the nurses, right? And some of the doctors that are in our ASCs. We need their perspective. Yeah. Because one of the things, Senator Breslin joined us today, and he received an award from the association. And one of the things he said is, the legislators don't come into their positions with an MPH or a master's degree, and they really need to learn. Yeah. And so we really need that. We also need different ideas about different different speakers we want, or education that they want.
Who do you want to hear from, and
Exactly.
what are your pain points? Because we don't always. We talked earlier. We talked a lot actually during a lot of our interviews about the anesthesia crisis and the fact that it came upon us quickly. And yet I'm hearing from experts that we probably should have heard about it earlier, that it was growing for quite a long time, and yet we didn't get the feedback right away to do it until it actually affected the president first. It was him that really kind of said, hey, wait a minute, I think we got something major going on here. And that's why we need that feedback. We need that feedback loop from our membership.
You know what's funny? Now that you bring up the anesthesia, there was a group in the Department of Health that used to meet and talk about open GME slots, right? Yeah. Graduate medical education slots. And we used to meet to identify where are our needs in this state. Yeah. That hasn't met since COVID.
Yeah.
So that's one place where I think we could go and start to talk to the department. The commissioner, when we talked to the commissioner and we invited him to meet with us, we said, what can we do to help you with your job? Yeah. Well, this is something that not only he may not even know that exists because it happened before he joined the Department of Health. So that's just another example of things that maybe we can come up with. And I just want to say, John, you've joined us for lobby days, and they're really important. Oh. I mean, and I don't know how to articulate how important they are, but it shows a lot when the legislators now can say there's an association of ambulatory surgery centers in New York State where they couldn't even 5 years ago. Yeah. So that's really amazing. And so folks can still join and do lobby day with us, even if they're not on one of the committees.
That's right.
And I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been doing lobbying since the 90s, with ASCA. And its predecessor here. And of course, we did that in the beginning. There were years. Well, you go through cycles, of course, with legislation, and you don't always have major problems there. But it seems to be escalating lately, I think, as we talked earlier, some of the other interviews that are included here talk about some of the initiatives that are going on in the other states that we have to watch out for and be prepared. And that's one of the things that your organization does, is helps to identify those trends before they actually end up in a legislative on the legislative agenda. So I did. Lastly, I just want to put we mentioned this in one of the other interviews. Every 2 weeks we get together. We call it a legislative update. We kind of all agreed we probably should change the title because we're talking about more than legislation. We talk about everything. And it's a great opportunity. And again, that's another good ability. It's a Zoom session where everybody's can be on the screen or not be on the screen, but it's your opportunity to speak up. We don't if you turn the microphone on, we can hear you, we can listen to you. So I think that's a benefit and an opportunity for you to give us the feedback in a much more real time way than exactly to your point.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, we learned how important communication was, and we did daily calls, and that really did help a lot of people. And what we learned as the association is they want to keep that up. So every 2 weeks we do that. We've asked people all the time, anyone having any problems? Are there any new events coming up that we want to share? Right now is a quieter time. The legislative
better knock on wood here.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I know, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But I do think we're starting to gear up. People are starting coming out of their vacation zone. Not that either one of us had one. No. But I do think that's a good opportunity, and that's a great plug. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
As always, Lisa, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, John.
And next, we had an opportunity to interview Darren Smith with SIS Information Systems and with Paul Doppelhoff, who is with RFX Solutions. And as I mentioned earlier, they talked about the benefits of exhibiting at a conference. So one of the things that we realize is sometimes first exhibitors don't realize that it really takes a while to get your audience, to get surgery centers to know you, and that you're not really, unfortunately for vendors, likely to make a sale that first time.
And I almost feel like if you try too hard to make a sale, you're not building that relationship and getting your name out there. And it's a matter of having the conference attendees become familiar with seeing your name and get comfortable with you. You might see them during breaks or during the dinner. The different vendors sat with with different groups of people, and that's really how it works, rather than that high pressure trying to make that sale that day.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that's one thing that's very different, I would say, about the New York State Association is all of the vendors are allowed to come into all the sessions. That doesn't happen at all state association meetings. And then we have something that we've done, for about 30 years is that when we have a dinner that the organization pays for between the 2 days of the conference, and that's a real good time to be able to interface with other people and as well as the vendors. So let's listen to Darren Smith and Paul Doppelhoff talk about the vendor experience at the New York State Association meeting.
So I'm here at the 2024 annual New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers conference. We're in the Desmond Hotel in Albany, New York, and I'm here with long-term friends here. We've known each other for a long time. It's great to have you on the podcast in the studio together. We're not always able to do this. I'm here with Darren Smith from SIS. I'm here with Paul Doppelhoff from RFX Solutions. And first of all, why don't you introduce yourselves in your current positions, because things do change in your organizations over time. So our listeners might not know exactly what you do now. Starting with you, Darren.
Sure. So I'm Darren Smith. I'm the VP of ASC Solutions at Surgical Information Systems. I'm a nurse by trade, was a nurse in the ASC industry for about 25 years before I joined Surgical Information Systems.
Right.
So I am the clinical expert for the company.
Or so they say, right? Yeah. Well, and that's right. And our listeners know Darren very well. I think if we were to go back and look at the interviews that we've done over the years, you probably win the award for the most interviews here.
I think so.
And Paul, you and I met actually through SIS originally,
Sure.
and now you're. Hint. Not everybody knows this yet, but RFX is about to become a sponsor. So I have actually two of my sponsors here on this. So Paul, tell us about your role.
Yeah, my name is Paul Doppelhoff. I'm the Vice President of Sales for RFX Solutions. We're a credentialing and compliance platform for ASCs, and I've been selling in the ASC space for about the last 13 years. I go back to the SourceMed days. Worked with Darren for quite a long time at
Right.
Surgical Information Systems, and now here at RFX. So I've been to more state association shows than probably most people that you've met.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Well, and one of the things that I always talk about is how important is. I was an administrator for 17 years, and the vendor-administrator relationship is often unusual and strained. And one of the things I've always said, and I just actually came back from the HIDA conference, the Health Industry Distributors Association. I speak to them every 2 to 3 years about selling to ASCs. How do you sell to ASCs? And one of the comments that I always make is that don't become salespeople. You know that. You're passionate about the very thing that I'm passionate about, that your job is to sell solutions. Or to provide solutions, or to recommend solutions. You should be more of a consultant. And when you come into the role as a consultant to an organization, the product sells itself. Now, we know we have a lot of listeners out there that are vendors here. So I want to talk a little bit about the vendor experience and vendor expectations, because the audience can't see you, but you're not young people. Let's put it that way. You've been in the industry for a while.
Thanks.
But you've been in the industry for a while, and you have the experience. You know that you're not like a lot of and it's hard to say it's not even young people necessarily, but it's people that are kind of new to marketing. They don't realize, what it takes to sell a product. What it takes to get engaged with a client. So I thought it might be a good thing to do to talk about vendor engagement in these conferences, the value of that, and what and setting expectations. So I want to start with you, Darren.
Well, we use state association meetings and national association meetings as a piece of the sales cycle.
That's a good way,
right?
Yeah.
So if you walk into an ASC state level meeting and expect to walk away with, closing 25 deals from that meeting, you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
Because that's not what, it's just a part of that sales cycle. They have always said that it takes 17 touch points in order for someone to actually grasp what you're trying to say. So
Right.
This is one of those touch points, one of your 17. It doesn't mean that you're not showing up at their doorstep, that you're not seeing them at the National Association meeting, and you're not seeing them at the State Association meeting, and now they're starting to absorb, oh, I see what you guys do, and
Right.
I understand your solution, I understand how it's going to fit my situation, because you're not just a car salesman here to sell me a car. You're here to sell me a solution that has the intention of making my process better.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And ultimately it comes down to patient care.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, all of your products, they might sound like there's something there to help the administrators, but there's much more to it than that. Paul.
Yeah, one of the great things that the New York State Association does that I think a few other states can learn from is you encourage your members to spend time at the booth. So you say, hey, it's not just going to spend time with vendors that your current customer. Go around and learn some things about the other vendors that might be out there that might be able to add some value or add something or improve a process at your center. But I think, in my mind, a lot of what goes into it is the pre-work, right?
Yeah.
So you guys also do a great job of letting us know who's going to be at the show ahead of time. So making sure that that first interaction at your booth isn't your first interaction.
Right.
Maybe you've set up appointments ahead of time and scheduled something to talk about while you're there. So you can have a plan of attack when you go to the meeting. And then to Darren's point, it isn't. You're not going to walk away with a bunch of contracts that are signed at the booth, and sometimes it'll take a year, or it'll take building that relationship. It'll take something that has to be budgeted for example.
Right.
So there's different measures of success dependent on the surgery center that you're working with or trying to talk to.
Well, and Darren, your company and my company have very, shall we say, expensive products out there. You know, not that yours isn't, but RFX is a little bit lower cost point. And you know, the problem for us is, you know, as you said, Paul, there's that cycle that you have in going out there. I don't need to sell every time. I could sell every 3 years and still pay the cost, you know, of this. But what's always amazing to me is the calls I get from people. I know you get that too, Darren and Paul. Paul's only been with RFX for a short period of time right now. I can't remember how long you've been.
Since June.
Since June. Okay. But you know we'll get a call 3 years from now and say, I saw you at the New York State Conference. Do you remember me? Of course I remember. You know, but that was the touch point that got to them. But they didn't need you until 3 years later when something happened, and you made a point with them, right? And Paul, this is going to be happening, especially with your product right now, where they have this point of pain, this pain that suddenly has to be taken care of. For me, it's like a regulatory issue comes up. Paul, it's going to be, I'm tired of the darn binders that we have, and of course with the vendor solutions. You know, one of the things that we're talking about here in New York is that, you know, there's soon new regulations that are going to require your system, SIS, the ASC systems to communicate with the statewide, you know, a database system. Not all the systems out there are going to be able to do that. And that's when the pain point's going to happen for SIS. Go ahead.
I think that another important point is that, you know, sales is a bell curve. There's the early adopters that jump on right away, and then as brand awareness increases, more people will say, we're interested in that. So at least with us at RFX, you know, people are now saying, you know, I've seen this platform at a show or two. Right. I'm more interested in learning about it now. Or another great opportunity is the folks that aren't using us to talk to their colleagues or folks from other centers that are, and that goes a lot farther way than me just standing at a booth and telling a prospective customer how great our platform is.
Well, go ahead.
They're always going to be wary because we've been to a lot of shows.
Yes.
Where there's that one company that comes sweeping in, buys the gigantic booth,
yes, that's right,
giving away the best merch, and you never see them again.
That's exactly right. It happens here.
They're all going to be a little bit wary of signing up with someone that doesn't have the staying power.
Being at these booths too, being at these conferences, I should say, there's another thing that you have to recognize is that it's not all the stuff that happens at the booth. New York has been New York. I started the organization in 1991. I was the president for a while, but I've been involved for a long time. And one of the things that we started very early in the 90s is that we had this dinner on the night, the night between the 2 days, and it was a dinner in the very beginning. Remember, Darren? Paul, both of you remember those days when we would go around the room and everybody would introduce themselves, and I just loved that. A smaller crowd. Now what are we talking about, Paul? Like over 200 people if you include the vendors now here, and I can't do that anymore. But that was a great way for people to really get an interaction. You would. You both would be at the tables, talking to people. You wouldn't be at the same table. You'd spread yourself around, and that was just as important, and I would probably argue more important than what happened at the booth, because maybe the next day they came to your booth after that, or maybe you're able to have them come back. So talk about how engaging that is. What you do, in order to get people interested in talking to you, even when they're not at the booth.
And that's something we've always believed in, and something that Paul and I have experienced is more connections get made outside of the booth than they ever do inside the booth.
Yeah, right? That's right. Mm-hmm.
So it's having those shared experiences with people when they understand that you've been selling in the ASC industry for 13 years. I've been a nurse for 30 years.
You were in an ASC, right.
Ran an ASC, so there's that commonality there. Making that personalized connection to them that drives them to trust you as an advisor, as a consultant, as that person that can provide more than just a product to them.
Right.
Yeah, and as time has gone by, to your point, the industry has gotten considerably bigger, but it's still small. I sat with somebody at dinner last night, and we realized that she had been my customer, over 10 years ago. Then we can go back and talk about things. And you're right there. And there's quite a bit of credibility that comes when folks let their guard down a little bit and realize that we all have the same common goal to improve things for surgery centers.
Well, and actually, you bring up an interesting point, too, is that the people you meet this time might not be at the same company the next time. And maybe they're a customer today. They were a customer yesterday, but now they're in a new center and they love the product, and now they've got to get their colleagues that they brought with them to see the product in action. So, and we all know this, our best business comes from people that have recommended us, to somebody else. And that's a big part of that selling job. I know nothing about marketing. I've learned everything I know about marketing from the two of you, I think. But obviously I've been relatively successful at what I do. But it really comes down, it's funny. I say I have to give away a lot of free stuff. And I'm not talking about our teddy bears and things like that out there. Yeah, it's that advice, that to be there when they call you up. And, sometimes you just have to, keep giving things away until they realize, okay, it's time for me to, to actually sign up.
Yeah. Well, something that we started talking about a lot when I was at CIS, and I still believe in today, is people buy from people first, company second, and products third. And situations like dinners like that give you the opportunity to really get to know those folks and on a personal level.
Right. One of the things as we finish up is that not being at a conference can be just as dangerous, can be very dangerous. We were talking about, actually in your case with RFX, there's a lot of organizations, or I should say, there have been a lot of organizations in your space over the years, and it's amazing to me, some of the names that we had seen that I haven't seen for years, so, and that sends a message. Yeah,
we want to support the associations, and as the associations have success, we believe that we have success too.
Right.
So we want to be a part of every state association as they continue to grow.
And RFX and SIS are going to be critical toward we've been talking about these multi-state initiatives going on. We got one coming up. RFX was a little slow to the game just because of, Paul, you're relatively new there, but that's going to be one of my passions. I know passions for you too. We want to, as much as possible, bring these states together to talk about various things that they can do together and to support each other, and that's something we'll be spending a lot more time talking about as the year goes on. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely, thanks, John.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And next, I was finally able to grab Kara Newberry. I keep seeing her at different conferences, and we agreed that we would talk at New York. Kara, for those that do not know, is the Chief Advocacy Officer for ASCA, for the ASC Association. And she spoke about the 2025 HOPD ASC proposed payment rule. So let's listen to her.
I'm here at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference at the Desmond Hotel in beautiful Albany, New York. I'm here with my dear friend, Kara Newberry, who we were just together, 3 weeks ago in Illinois, and I asked if she was going to do an interview there. She said, why don't we wait until we get to New York, which we have a much better setup here anyway. So welcome to New York, and thank you for, I chair the Education Committee. You were, of course, I love Bill, but I love bringing you to New York here because you always are very gracious with your time for the podcast. So let's just start. What's going on with the 2025 proposed rule and your response to it?
Great. Yeah. So thanks for having me. We at ASCA just submitted our comment letter in response to the 2025 proposed rule last week.
Right.
In those comments, there were kind of three major areas. Number one is the annual update, which of course ASCs are still on the hospital market basket for the time being.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep that. And then we focused heavily on the ASC covered procedure list,
right,
and really CMS's lack of transparency when presented with codes for consideration. They didn't even, mention in the proposed rule any of the procedures that we had requested. And then the ASC quality reporting program, which was much more, there was a lot more in the proposed rule than we had anticipated, especially since, ASCs are going to be mandated to use the OSCAPS survey to comply with the ASC quality reporting program starting next year. We didn't anticipate there would be a lot of new measures, and of course CMS loves to surprise us. So there were
never in a pleasant way either.
Not usually.
Let's break this down a little bit. Let's start with the rate increase this year. And we always have to temper this by saying this is not across the board.
Right.
It varies dramatically depending upon the procedures you're doing. But were we disappointed? I mean, we're happy that we're on the hospital market basket.
It's always tough because we recognize that a 2.6% update across codes is not keeping pace with the increasing costs that our facilities are facing to operate,
especially in wage inflation. I mean, I think wage inflation
exactly. And of course, that's a whole nother topic with the wage index, can be so variable.
Yeah.
But we know nobody's wages across the country, even in the rural areas, are, decreasing. So, but we see declines in wage indices, which doesn't make sense. But yeah, 2.6%, I try to be a little more positive than I used to be. So, the physician fee schedule, once again, saw a decrease, a cut. So that's why we really want to stay on the hospital market basket, because it has at least shown a better update than what we would see for the consumer price index for all urban consumers the past couple of years. So, we weren't thrilled, obviously, but within the confines of how our payment system is designed, is probably as good as could be expected. I will also say, some of the other payment systems final rules are starting to come out, and they're seeing a slight increase over that. And so we're, optimistic that we'll get a better update than 2.6% in the final rule due to that.
Yeah, and we have been seeing some recent inflationary numbers that are ticking up just a little bit, and I think that happened last year, if I remember right. We were slightly higher. So this is all proposal. So as you're listening to this, whenever you're listening to this, just be aware that we're going to wait until November.
If it's prior to November 1st or 2nd, then we don't know exactly what it'll be.
Moving on to the very, very disappointing list of procedures that were going to be paid by Medicare. Can you talk a little bit about our disappointment and what we're hoping to change?
Absolutely. So CMS for the first time opened up a portal on their website. Interested stakeholders have to have an account. You have to log in, which is always a pain with, government systems. And you can submit codes for consideration, provide research or other data that you have, attach that to your submission. And so ASCA was fairly optimistic because this was the first time that CMS had that more transparent, open process.
You better put
all
air quotes around transparent.
Exactly. And So we submitted codes. We submitted a couple of lumbar fusion codes, which have been requested for years. And actually, they're the only 2 codes within the ambulatory payment classification group, the APC group, that are not payable in the ASC setting now, because they're in the same group with total shoulder and total ankle. So once we got those added, I said, well, now these are the only 2 that are left. And of course, codes are supposed to be grouped by complexity and cost. So if they're similar in those areas, they should be covered. And CMS didn't add those. And then we also requested a bunch of cardiovascular codes, specifically some cardiac ablation codes. Yeah. And ASCA has formed a CV working group to kind of spearhead some of those efforts. And not only did CMS not add any of the requested codes, they didn't even mention any of them in the proposed rule, which we kind of mentioned. We were kind of harsh a little bit in our comment letter because, it was very frustrating not to see any mention of the codes. How are we supposed to engage and provide, data if we don't know why they're not adding them?
Right.
So it's actually very good. The Heart Rhythm Society is all in now, and they have been extremely helpful, and we're working together and collaborating on this effort. And so we have a lot of electrophysiologists who are providing data. They just published something in the Heart Rhythm, journal. And so we're optimistic that in 2026 we might see those. I don't think we're going to see them added, in the final rule, like we were able to do with total shoulder, unfortunately. But it will make a big push for 2026.
And then lastly, when it comes to the 2025 proposal, of course, quite a number of disappointments, I think, though not unanticipated, with Medicare quality reporting. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we were disappointed with? I think for me, the COVID-19 vaccination requirement reporting.
It's like the bane of my existence, John. Yeah. So the ASC 20 that you were just referencing, the COVID healthcare personnel vaccination requirement, we oppose that from its inception. Right. There's actually a piece of legislation by a congresswoman from Texas, Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne, which would prohibit CMS from requiring that measure. From an epidemiology perspective, we don't get it because we don't collect the vaccination status on our patients or the people who accompany them to the facility. It's never really made sense, and it especially does not make sense now. So the fact that it just remains in the ASC quality reporting program and an opportunity really to penalize facilities, because if they fail to report, as you know, they're going to get penalized 2%. So we're very disappointed to see that remain, and have continued to ask if it's going to remain, move it to annual reporting only once per year, as we had with the flu vaccine when we had that measure. But regardless, the measure does not make sense for the ASC setting.
Well, and for those listeners that are not totally familiar with this, hopefully you all are, and are reporting, but you might not be the actual reporting in your organization. This is probably the most cumbersome because of the quarterly requirement.
You have to pick 1 week per month. Yeah. And then that data is pulled by CMS quarterly. Yeah. And so if you didn't have the data entered for those, 3 different months, and it's very confusing. And if one of your weeks, goes over 2 different months, it's people don't understand which month it counts for, it's very silly, because it's not like people are getting vaccinated every month. That information, that data is not changing that frequently. So,
well, and it really does call into question something we'll address in a few minutes, is the whole, is this really a quality measure? Is this really indicating the quality of the care that you're providing, as opposed to, gathering statistics that are being used for some other purpose within the government? Moving on to some of the other measures there, which ones were you? Let's talk about OSCAPs.
Okay, yeah. So no changes to OSCAPs, and I know a lot of facilities have been at least asking us at ASCA over the last few months. Hopefully, they were hoping that there would be some either delay in implementation or further changes made, and there were not. So I hope everybody who's listening to this knows and understands that OSCAPs is coming. It's coming in January. And if you're not able to get up to that 200 completed surveys, you are potentially subject to a penalty. Now, ASCA has requested and we've gotten some confirmation that CMS will do this, that if you are operational with an approved vendor by the beginning of the year, and if you just fail to get that 200 completed surveys through no fault of your own or through the vendor's fault, that you will, get credit for that. Of course, it still calls into question, why are we doing this? I know that a lot of facilities had other patient satisfaction surveys where they were getting more, maybe pertinent data to help them improve than they feel like they're getting from this patient experience survey, this OSCAP survey, and they're not maybe doing those patient satisfaction surveys anymore. And so now you're only getting a smaller percentage of insights from the facility. So, yes, I feel like I'm being very negative about the quality reporting program, but as you and I were talking about before we got on here, from our perspective at ASCA, the benefits should be twofold. It should be data that is helpful for the public, the consumers, before they come to your facility to see the quality that's provided. And it should be, useful for the facility for them to improve. And if that's not happening, if these measures are not allowing for that, then we're missing the mark.
Yeah, we seem to be moving further and further away with each of these things that are being added. And so you're also telling me during dinner last night that there's also some issues or potential issues coming down the pike with regard to the providers. So one thing for our listeners that might not be totally aware of this, as part of OSCAPs, you have to, and this is OAS-CAHPS. I'll put a link in the show notes here. So we throw these acronyms out there, and we assume everybody's listening or that understands them. But for those of you who are not familiar, this requires you as an organization to hire a CMS approved vendor who will do these and way too much detail that we can get into, and listen to any of our previous podcasts where we talk about it. But you have to use an approved vendor. You have to sign up with this vendor. It is going to be expensive to sign up for it, and it's going to be cumbersome because of the data that has to go to them and come back to it. So how many vendors are there?
And if you work with an EHR vendor, you have to make sure that they can work together. I've been hearing, upwards of $150 or $175 a month to,
interface.
For those to interface. Yeah. John, I think the last time I checked, there were 16 approved vendors.
And not all of them are answering the phone.
15 or 16. Yeah. Well, there's one, Qualtrics, who has informed us that they've reached their max for ASC, clients for right now. They don't have the bandwidth to take on any more. And of course, that was one of the more reasonably priced vendors. Yeah, right. There's at least one who's charging $20,000 a year. And so we've also pushed back with CMS and said that CMS, the agency, should really have a better sense of how much these vendors are charging when they approve them. Because if it's the case where we have fewer options and the only ones that are left are the more expensive, I think facilities are going to have to make the difficult decision whether or not they continue to participate with the ASC quality reporting program.
Right. And again, you and I have talked about the other question coming down the pike is, given the penalty, which is 2% of decrease or 2% reduction in the increase in your Medicare reimbursement rate for fee for service. Now, of course, you could for fee for service claims, but of course, if your vendor is using, or if your insurance company is using the Medicare fee schedule as part of the calculation there, then that would impact those payers.
We have heard some private payers who say that you have to participate with the ASC quality reporting program in order for them to negotiate with you and be in network. But so obviously check with, before you make any decisions like that, make sure that you're checking with all of your payers. And I will also say that there was one quality reporting program that saw their penalty doubled. So they are now penalized 4% moving forward. But as I know we have a lot of different topics that we're covering here on this podcast, but with Medicare fee for service declining, now there are more than 50% of Medicare beneficiaries have a Medicare Advantage plan.
Right.
And there probably are going to be fewer and fewer ASCs who are really subject to the ASC quality reporting program moving forward, because there is still that low volume exemption. So if you're under 240 Medicare fee-for-service claims, you technically don't have to participate. And we've told CMS this too. We said we think that there were a lot of facilities who participated because they wanted to be, good, partners with, the ASC community and with CMS, and they're going to probably not want to participate moving forward because if they don't have to, because of the increased burden, and to our earlier points, really the fact that none of this data is all that helpful to them to improve their facility.
Very well said. And one point we should make too is that this does replace your quality, your satisfaction surveys if the questions would duplicate the questions that are on that.
Well, you can, right. I mean, technically you could send out the OSCAP survey to certain individuals, and then you could still do your, if you had an in-house patient satisfaction survey to others, but that gets complicated. Right. And I know a lot of facilities have chucked that and say they're just not doing it at all. So they're losing that information that they previously had.
And I'd actually argue that's a decrease in the quality because we get so much good data.
Right, absolutely.
When we're able to modify our satisfaction surveys based upon the results of previous satisfaction surveys. So, and then the last thing, which I think was a bit of a surprise, and you and I talked about this, and I know that'll probably be a big topic of conversation when you get on the stage. Talk a little bit about the health equity.
So these were cross-program measures. So they are being proposed to be added to 3 different facilities at the same time. But these health equity measures have not been tested in any of the outpatient settings, which was a focal point of our comments. So the first one is basically an attestation. So the facility will be attesting to that they, are paying attention to health equity. They're working, to achieve certain goals, but you have to meet all of the criteria within each domain to check that box.
There's 5 domains.
And there's 5 domains, and there's one that requires EHR.
Yeah.
So if you don't have, a robust EHR technology at your facility, you can't, you can't check that box. Now, of course, our quality reporting program remains a pay for participation, not a pay for performance quality reporting program, but still, you're already down one. It will be public information.
Yeah.
And so you're basically saying that your governing body, is working toward this. You're doing all these things. Of course, they actually use terminology that's not used in the ASC setting because they didn't test it for us. It's basically the exact same language from the hospital measure, and they just took out the word hospital and put facility in. And then the next 2 measures are related, and they are looking at, different needs, such as, are your needs being met as an individual? So, if people, if they don't have transportation, if they have food insecurity, if they, have housing insecurity, and, these are all very important data points, I think, from a public health perspective for, us to know so that we can figure out how to address them. But it doesn't make sense for an ASC, which is, potentially only seeing that person once, maybe twice.
For a very short period.
Period of time. And what are we supposed to do for that person? So if you ask them, okay, so you have food insecurity. So what then is the ASC responsible to do to try to address that?
Right.
And it's a situation where there's one where they're asking, do you feel safe in your home? And as we know, in an ASC setting, it's very different from maybe if you're going to see your primary care doctor, where you're most likely going to be in that room by yourself. And so you could have potentially a person with you. Maybe it's even your abuser.
Right.
You're not going to feel comfortable answering a question about your safety in that situation. So it's just another example of, maybe a good intention, but CMS didn't think through, and part of it is, like I said, it hasn't been tested.
Yeah.
They didn't think through how this would really be operationalized in an ASC. I mean, one of the surveys that I saw that you could use for these 2 measures was like 30 some questions long. Yeah. I mean, that would double the time that a person is back there pre-op. So it doesn't make sense for our setting. So we did push back against all 3 of those measures. The first measure, the attestation one, is set to go into effect in 2025.
Immediately,
So you'd have to basically start collecting that data January 1, which once again just doesn't make sense. So,
and we should again repeat that these are all proposed as you're listening to this. We recorded this in September. We'll of course follow up later on to see what ends up in the following. So I don't want everybody to panic if they're listening to me later and it doesn't end up in there, but
right.
There's probably a good chance.
I think there's a good chance they will end up in some way. Maybe we can delay for a year or two, but there's a big push for uniformity across different provider types. Of course, once again, I would argue might get duplication of the information.
Or conflicting data.
Or conflicting data, exactly. And then what happens? So, the social needs ones, it's a little trickier. And then, the positive rate is the third of the measures. So if people do acknowledge that they have housing insecurity or food insecurity or whatever, you're reporting on that. And once again, that's helpful information maybe from a public health perspective, but I'm not sure how the ASC is going to improve or how potential patients looking at that, how that helps them decide where to have their surgery performed.
And we're moving into territory that none of our administrators, directors of nursing really have any experience in this area. So we're going to, now at the podcast here, depending upon what happens, we'll be talking to Kara, and helping everybody through this process, because I do think that I'm concerned, about how to implement it, because it's going to involve the governing body. It's going to involve changes. It's going to involve education to the staff. So more to come on that. Yes. Anything else going on that ASCA's keeping an eye on for us?
There's always plenty going on, John. But Congress is still looking at price transparency legislation and, pushing that through at the end of the year. So that's something that we are extremely concerned about.
Right.
So requiring ASCs to post on their website very specific data about the rates for various payers. So we're still trying to push back and combat against that, and we're just really also gearing up for next session already. And planning on pushing forth some of our provisions of our legislation to hopefully help ASCs succeed in the future. So there's always something going on, and then there's the prior authorization demonstration project that CMS has thrown out there. So for 10 states. So there's always something going on. But we are taking a little bit of a breath now. And, obviously things will ramp back up significantly in November when we have our final payment rule and post-elections.
Right. Well, we'll definitely try to get back together with you at that time to do that. Meanwhile, we'll give you some resources. And as always, Carrie, you're so generous with your time. And ASCA, big push with ASCA. I just want to, say, just become a member. I know the cost is difficult. We talk a lot about special state association meetings. That it's difficult sometimes to be able to go to both, but the value for what you get at ASCA is incredible. And we'll put a link for people to sign up right away.
Appreciate that, John.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yep.
With the rapid changes occurring in the ASC industry, the exodus of experienced ASC administrators, nurse managers, and business office managers, there is an increasing demand for quality leadership education. That's where our industry-leading boot camps come in. In 2021, we introduced our Administrator Boot Camp and the Director of Nursing Boot Camp, and in 2023, the Business Office Manager Boot Camp. These boot camps have become the industry standard for ASC leadership training, and with over 225 graduates, lead the industry in mentored virtual training.
Live virtual training for the Administrator Boot Camp occurs every January and July, and the Director of Nursing Boot Camp is October and May. Our new Business Office Manager Boot Camp will continue in the spring of 2024. There are also on-demand versions of each boot camp for those who simply can't attend the live virtual programs.
All boot camps, including the on-demand boot camps, include access to resources, membership in the ASC-Central Patron Program, copies of John's latest books, access to credentialing, conditions for coverage, and other recorded training programs, and of course our regular drop-in Zoom sessions where you can ask questions and interact with other patron and boot camp members.
Our programs also include AEU credits for those that are CASC certified. Our programs are comprehensive and taught by the nation's leading ASC experts and are designed for all levels of leadership, from experienced leaders who want to enhance their skills or pass the CASC exam or those who are new to the industry and wish to learn how to run an ASC.
For more information about our live, virtual, and on-demand programs, visit ASC-Central at asc-central.com, or you can call us at 585-594-1167 or email us at info@ascpodcast.com for more information. One of the things that we tried to accomplish with this year's conference is to look back on how far the ambulatory surgery industry, especially in New York State, has come from, in the past to where we are today and where we're heading in the future. So we had an opportunity to interview three of the speakers, three doctors actually, who spoke about their experiences. It's not always the case, Sue, that we interview doctors during our special episodes here. So this was a great opportunity. And we started with Dr. Brett Bernstein. He is a gastroenterologist with Eastside Endoscopy. And he's, as I said, talking about how far we have progressed.
So I'm here at the New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual meeting in Albany, New York. It's September of 2024. I'm here with Brett Bernstein. Actually, Dr. Bernstein, you and I know each other. We've worked together a couple times over the years. I obviously know your administrator, who is a dear, dear friend of mine. And you've been very active, obviously, in industry. You just finished a speech, or a conversation, really, like a conversation among three doctors. It was a panel discussion about where we were and where we're heading right now. And, depending upon the order of these interviews going out, we talked to an orthopedic surgeon, a bariatric surgeon. Now your passion, of course, is endoscopy, GI procedures, and you're very well known in the industry, certainly in the state, for this. So talk a little bit about, well, first of all, introduce yourself to the audience here.
Yeah, so Dr. Brett Bernstein, I'm chief of the Division of Gastroenterology, Mount Sinai Beth Israel, founder of Eastside Endoscopy in New York City, which was the second only joint venture single specialty GI ASC in New York at the time it was founded in 2009. So I've had a long history in this area, and I've seen tremendous changes.
And you're an award-winning center, like some of the centers that we work with in the city. You've done a great, and you've been awarded, for that great work that you've done. So you've seen a lot, like I have. We've been around. We've both been around for a while.
Absolutely.
And we've seen a lot of changes, and we've come a long way. Talk a little bit about, what you've seen in the industry in the past and how far we've come and where we're heading, just like you talked about in the session.
Yeah, so, what's amazing is GI was clearly at the forefront of the industry, very much probably the first high-volume specialty that migrated from hospitals and offices to these centers. And what I saw back in 2009 was a reluctance of physicians necessarily to embrace this model, but incredibly quick uptake, obviously, because these centers are equal in quality, better, and certainly better in efficiency than hospital-based units, and from a fiscal standpoint, very successful in general.
Right, and we're solving a very urgent problem that's out there of being able to give faster access to people that are in need of these types of services, and perhaps diagnose situations that might have gone if people weren't able to get in sooner to be able to diagnose those problems sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Our center has 5 rooms. The GI procedures can be done at a rapid interval and still maintain incredibly high quality, which is what is our mantra, of course.
Right.
I've seen just really positives, but like all models, there are external and internal pressures that we have to adapt to.
Right. Yeah, Dr. Bernstein, I'm a surveyor at HHC, and I observed a GI procedure, and I've seen hundreds of GI procedures over my career, of course, but I observed a GI procedure about 6 months ago where they were using AI to watch the screen and identify potential polyps.
Right.
It was fascinating to me. I usually don't stay the whole procedure, even though your procedures tend to be short. And I was just fascinated by this whole thing. And, I looked at all the equipment and how it was connected. And you and I talked before we even hit the record button about, the future of AI. And actually, we've already talked about it in a previous interview here. There's a lot of negative conversations going on about AI there as well as positive. So talk a little bit about that, where you think that how that's going to impact, in particular, your specialty and where there might be some real advantages. And then we'll talk in general too.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great topic, great question. I only see it as being a positive. Yeah. I think we're just at the very beginning of seeing what it can do for us. We introduced an AI platform into our center about probably 4 months ago. Actually have seen a dramatic increase in polyp detection. These systems that exist are known as CAD right now, which is computer-aided detection. But really what they do is they're great for the patient because, the endoscopist who's, let's say, at the lower end or middling end of detecting polyps is turned into a much better doctor.
Wow, yeah.
And the better doctors are able to do somewhat better. But
and the data that is collected from those doctors who are able to detect things that other doctors might not have been able to detect goes into the database to assist in future.
Yes, absolutely. So the adenoma detection rate is our one outcome measure in terms of quality in GI. And so it's helping us be better, not just look better. And in addition, it also drives revenue, obviously, because the detection of more lesions is good for the business end of things, but most importantly, great for the patient.
Right, and good outcomes there. So there's other applications, though, out there for AI. We were talking at the ASCA conference, the annual ASC Association conference, about how it's going to help organizations to be able to identify how do you properly code and submit bills, and based upon past history of people being able to get the code right the first time, that might be it. What else is out there that I don't even know about yet?
Yeah, we're in the process of trialing with our endoscopic EMR company to actually, they're working to develop a real-time dictation program that'll serve two purposes within our field. One, pre-populate reports, also pre-populate pathology requisitions. And the honest truth is GI is a field which already is pretty efficient in the ASC setting. Absolutely. However, shaving minutes off of a procedure time and shaving minutes off of turnover can mean the difference between profit and loss.
Right. And again, fitting more patients in, patient satisfaction,
correct,
physician satisfaction, all those things.
Ultimately, those are the top goals.
Right. So what is going on with GI? What are some of the developments that we should be watching for as administrators and directors of nursing in our surgery centers?
Well, I think, there are pressures not just in GI, but for all ambulatory centers in the area of keeping providers and keeping staff.
Yeah.
So I think staff retention, I think the ability to, again, creating a culture is what I like to focus on, ensuring that you have create a culture and sustain a culture where your staff feel respected, culture of safety, culture of quality, and I think everything grows from that. And I think you have to look at culture as a strategic and business imperative.
Right. So in your role as medical director, what do you think are some of the challenges? We're gearing up to do a medical director conference next year as part of the podcast. And, one of the things that we're struggling with right now are, what are the demands? What are the things that we might be able to help as we put, and you'll definitely be involved in that, by the way. You don't know that yet. But what do you think are some of the things that we as administrators, directors of nursing can help to make your job easier, or things that we should be watching out for that, will become part of our landscape, soon?
I think trying to get physicians to be engaged in organizations like this is key. Yeah. I think, again, that the average owner or participant in an ASC is either, I hate to be blunt about it, but is there to either pick up a check at the end of the month or simply wants to use the facility because they like it and it's efficient. But I really believe the key to the success of an organization like this is engagement, buy-in, And we have to figure out ways of doing that through, quality, of course, has to be important to everybody.
Right.
But we have to find a way of leveraging our belief in quality and engaging physicians and seeing that quality and safety can drive economic stability.
Right.
And but we need to get these community physicians involved.
Yeah.
I think it's key.
Well, and you're involved in New York State. Part of this conversation is about what's going on in New York State. You obviously are one of the owners of a surgery center in New York State. What do you think is one of the things that are holding us back from really, moving forward? We seem to be the last state sometimes to do certain things. We've been talking about cardiology in the session here. What are some of the things that we could perhaps work together to try to improve in this state?
I think fear of the regulatory environment for physicians is a big thing. I mean, for me to put together this center in 2009, sometimes I feel like it took 10 years off my life.
My first surgery center I built in 1990. It cost $500,000 in legal fees alone. Talk about where we were then and where we are today. But you're right. Even in 2009, it was a challenge.
And there was a culture of fear among the hospitals potentially protesting. I think a lot of that's gone away. I think this is sort of a watershed moment for societies like this because we have the buy-in from the people in the state.
Right.
We definitely know that physicians know that this is the model of the present and the future.
Right.
However, trying to get people to, again, understand how important it is to belong to organizations like this and to be active and to support them, I think is key.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we really try to do with the special episodes here is to encourage everybody to be part of a state association. It's great to be able to listen to, a free podcast that talks about some of the things that are out there, but it doesn't replace that interaction that you have. We started at 8:00 this morning. I've been here since Sunday, and I forgot that we hadn't actually started the conference yet because we've had so many conversations with colleagues that we only see once a year during these conferences here, and I'm sure you've experienced that too.
Yeah.
Those deep conversations, we just don't have a chance to do it because we're busy all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, getting physicians to buy into anything, we know it takes 10 years for the average guideline for anything to percolate through to community physicians. Yeah. I think the work that this organization has done in fast order is just amazing. Right. But we have to be even faster.
Yeah. We've come a long way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernstein. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Hang on one second.
And next I interviewed Marina Kurian, a doctor. She's actually a bariatric surgeon, and she too talked about where we have been and where we're heading in the future, especially with regard to bariatric surgery.
I'm here at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference. We're in the Desmond Hotel in Albany, New York. I'm here with Marina Kurian. Dr. Kurian is with the New York Minimally Invasive Surgery organization, and she has just finished a presentation, part of a panel discussion here at the organization. And we thought we would talk a little bit about what's going on. You have quite a bit of experience. First of all, introduce yourself and talk about what you do.
Okay, so I'm a bariatric surgeon, but I'm also a general surgeon. Do a lot of minimally invasive surgery, and I was on the panel talking about doing some of our bariatric procedures in an outpatient setting, which, in New York State is a little bit more new. But when we look at like New Jersey or other parts of the country, it's certainly not new. I mean, we carefully select patients that actually can have procedures done at an ambulatory care center or in an ambulatory setting, much like you do with any other procedure. You have to weigh the risks and benefits, obviously.
Well, in New York, we always seem to be the last to do things. I mean, it's been taking us a while. We're still working on cardiac. I know one of the other panelists is talking about the cardiology. And in our industry, we're starting to get a lot more competition. We have other surgery centers coming up. We're, of course, always been competing with hospitals. We have the situation now, too, that with office-based surgery practices, they're starting to compete with us. We expect in the future to see eye surgery, like cataract surgery, moving out of the ambulatory surgery center into the office-based setting. So we're always looking for procedures that we perhaps have not spent time, doing or haven't been done in surgery centers in the past. I think bariatric is definitely one of those possibilities. Tell us a little bit about the growth of it right now, the demand for it.
Well, I want to just preface what we're talking about now by saying that we were doing a lot of outpatient bariatric procedures, but it was the lap band, and that gastric banding has gone down in volume over the past few years. We still do some, but in specialized centers. And in terms of our overall numbers, it really depends where you are in this country and what the access is to GLP-1 receptor agonists. They can affect our numbers. But in truth, long term, I think we're going to see a rise in bariatric surgery. And I think it's because, these medications are good, but they're not as good as surgery right now. And not just that, there's, a lot of expense in terms of
ongoing expense.
Ongoing expense, but even getting the medication, access to the medication, cost.
Right. So what type of opportunities out there? Our audience are ambulatory surgery centers throughout the country, that are always looking for opportunities. What types of surgery, who should they be looking for in the community that might be, growth industry for them? The doctors that they might perhaps be reaching out to that they might have forgotten about or did not know that they can do procedures in an ASC.
Yeah, well, I think for me, I'm really a general surgeon, right? So and I do foregut, I do hernia, I do, as I said, bariatrics. So all of those actually can be done in an outpatient surgery center.
And often are, yeah.
Often are, yeah. And it's just a matter of having the right equipment to really address, the needs of the surgeon and the patient. We were talking about those robots that help speed up, hip and knee replacements. I mean, so those are specialized equipment that you guys are using, in this ASC to help. Really, it's the efficiency of the procedure, but it also is good for the patient, right? Shorter anesthesia, et cetera. And I think that we have that opportunity because our minimally invasive techniques are so good to really get the patients out quickly. And that's why I think a lot of what we do in general surgery could go over to an ASC.
You made a very good comment during the session where we were talking about the growth of the use of robots in the surgery center, and that it's very expensive, of course. And a lot of people that are coming out of training, and you're not just out of training. I'm just going to tell our audience, they can't see it, but what I mean is that you're not just out of training. This is something you've been doing for a while. And you made the comment that, you can do just as well and perhaps better, without using a robot. It's not something that that expense isn't necessarily necessary to be able to do the types of procedures that you're doing out there. It's not an end solution for everybody.
No, I think it depends on your training. I was trained really well in advanced laparoscopic techniques, and I ended up training a lot of other people. So, when you're a fellow and you're actually training, attendings how to do laparoscopy, it's a different situation. And so I did that early in my career, obviously, and so this is why I don't necessarily use the robot currently. But there is value in robotic technique, especially if we start getting into all the AI enhanced or digital surgery type of applications, using indocyanine green, for example, or like being able to map out different anatomic landmarks, I guess, things that I would do now in my mind.
Right.
With certain onlays, you can say, like, hey, there's the vena cava. I'm like, I know it's there. I'm not forgetting about it. But it could be like a little, a reminder or whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to come up in the next 5 to 10 years that actually make robotic surgery even more interesting.
So for the average administrator out there, director of nursing, that's looking for opportunities and trying to figure out what they should be preparing for in your area, what are the up and coming procedures? You talked about lap bands are kind of heading out now, but there's going to be newer procedures that are probably on the cusp of becoming popular.
Well, so the sleeve gastrectomy can certainly be done outpatient, and it is. But again, you have to carefully select your patients. Yeah. There are some practices that are doing gastric bypass or one anastomosis gastric bypass outpatient, and it's also possible to do some revisions outpatient. It just really depends on the disease burden of the patient and the comfort of the surgeon and also the team at the ASC to really make that happen. Right. I mean, some ASCs really, they hate when you're there past 5 o'clock, right? Yeah. So others, though, are like, yeah, we're 23. We're going to discharge them tomorrow. I mean, my girlfriend is an owner in a surgery center out in Portland, and her patients get kept overnight.
Yeah.
All of them, and so that makes a complete difference. It's still 23-hour admission. Right?
Yeah.
So it makes a difference in everybody's comfort level.
Right. And of course, the regulations in the states are often different. New York requires a physician to be with that patient the entire time, so not always efficient for them to do overnight stays in the state. It's 23 hours allowed, but you got to have a doctor there. And I think that's one of the reasons we're a little bit behind, many of the other states right now on that. Marina, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
John.
My pleasure.
And then I spoke to Dr. Michael Gross. He's an orthopedic surgeon in New York, and he spoke about the advances in orthopedic surgery and how that's changed the ASC industry.
I'm here at the New York State Association meeting in September of 2024. I'm with Dr. Michael Gross. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he just finished a presentation, a panel discussion about what are some of the trends in the industry right now that we should be considering as administrators and directors of nursing. Dr. Gross, please introduce yourself and welcome.
I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I have a lot of experience in the ASC field. I started in New Jersey, so we've been very active in ASCs for about 15 or 20 years. Currently, I am the orthopedic director for the New York Hotel Trades Council Employee Benefits Fund, which is a union benefit fund. If you're a hotel worker in New York City, you get free health care.
Right.
And so these are, we have a bunch of clinics all over the 5 boroughs where they come and get health care, and then I manage I either treat them orthopedically or send them out, and I do my surgeries in an ASC.
Wonderful. So what do orthopedics is the game right now. I mean, it's really, in my view, the hottest, and it has been for a long time. But it's those are the procedures that really should be moving to our environment. They're cost effective in our environment. The quality of care is just as good. I would argue much better actually in a surgery setting. And of course, in your role at the Hotel Trades Council, which by the way, I've worked with in the past. You don't know that, but I've been involved with them in the past. Your job is to make sure you get good quality health care to your constituents and to make sure you get it at a reasonable cost. How do we do that with ASCs?
So as you said, ASCs are uniquely positioned for that.
Yeah.
And I think that freestanding ASCs, more so than hospital-affiliated ASCs, are really in the best position for that, for the economic side. From a purely medical, clinical patient care side, the more procedures we can do in an ASC, the better it is for the patients. I think that patients who don't stay overnight, who leave, they start getting better faster.
Right.
It's a different mindset than you're sitting in a bed and a nurse is bringing you breakfast.
Yeah.
If you're at home, you're well. And I think the driving force now for orthopedics is really the anesthesia.
Yes.
That in using a lot of the local blocks or the nerve blocks that we use, we can get the patients in and out of the recovery room faster, and we can get them home with no pain, which I think really is what allows us to move more and more things into an ambulatory setting. The one caveat is that as we become too aggressive with that, we may be picking patients who would be more appropriate to do in a hospital because just for monitoring.
Yeah.
There are and not only because of their health, but there are certain procedures that have potential complications, let's say vascular complications. And it's very comforting to be able to say, I'll put my finger on that while it's bleeding. Can you get a vascular surgeon?
Yeah.
And there may not be one in a surgery center that day because they're not there that day. So we have to be careful not only in analyzing the patients that we take to surgery centers, but analyzing the procedures.
Well, and that really gets into one of my passions, which is quality improvement and making sure that we learn from everything that happens. We're as we establish standards, and we might be conservative in the beginning and then start to expand into, kind of, I'm not saying pushing the limit, but, say, hey, Linda, we did so well. We had 0 complications here. Everybody has a great outcome. Maybe we can take slightly sicker patients but watch the outcomes and make sure that we are right on the ball in stopping or changing our policies when we realize they're not working.
So I'm going to take some issue with that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use an example. Patients always ask me after I've operated on them, what should I do this? Can I do this exercise? Can I go back in the gym and I do that? And I say, well, not really. Let's think about what you're really asking me. You're asking me, what can you do to make this hurt? because you're going to exercise until it hurts and then you're going to stop.
Yeah.
And so you're asking me, what cases can we bring into a surgery center so we can find out what complications we're going to get?
Yeah, and that's not really what I meant. And you know that one.
Yeah, but that's, you know what I mean?
No,
So
that's a good point.
What I think is more important is, and I think AI will help us with this a lot, is analyzing huge population bases and see which cases, even done as inpatients, are more likely to have the kind of complications we don't want to have. We don't have to have the complications as outpatients to find out we shouldn't be doing them.
Right.
We should be watching what complications occur on inpatient and what complications don't occur.
Yes.
And the ones that, okay, this one looks like it's safe. We can do this one, you know, and no procedure has no complications, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, the rate is very low, and the complications are not catastrophic.
Yeah.
And so they can. And I think that's the right way to do it, to analyze that data, inpatient, and then say, okay.
I love it. That's exactly right. And this is, of course, I mean, there's some great applications coming down the road of AI, and I think as you described it, this is great. You know, as we feed information from those hospitals, from the surgery centers, and by the way, you know, for my listeners, this is why we want EMRs. This is why we have that data shared, you know, universally, so that we can learn from everything.
And registries,
right?
You know, that data collection, as hard as it is, as much as it's a pain, it's really important. So to advance our specialties, to advance our care,
right?
You know, and hopefully AI and all these language based computer programs will allow us to collect data in a much more painless way to do it.
And almost like without us even thinking about it.
Now, you know, there's AI that you can put in an exam room, and it listens to the conversations that you have with a patient, and it populates your note.
Yeah.
So it can certainly do that with, or may be able to in the future, you know, with a lot of the data. And data is what drives safety.
Yeah.
You know?
So what orthopedic procedures out there, you know, our listeners, things are evolving very quickly. Right now in the industry, you know, we've been talking on the podcast about the future of cataract surgery and surgery center. Frankly, it's not going to be with us, I would say, much longer. I really do suspect that a lot of those procedures start morphing into or moving into, you know, no OBS environment. Indeed, some, you know, orthopedic procedures are moving into that. So we've got to keep an eye out for, you know, those opportunities in the future. You know, so our listeners need to know, you know, what's on the horizon. Not everybody is, you know, got ready access to somebody like yourself who's on the bleeding edge of what's going on.
I hope not. So two things, and that's a great question, but there are two phases to that question. Yeah. What ambulatory procedures are going to be in the surgery centers in the next 5 years, and what things are going to migrate out into offices? And so I think in orthopedics, there's going to be a lot of hand cases that migrate into people's offices, carpal tunnels, trigger fingers. Yeah. As the arthroscopy equipment becomes smaller and smaller, there are now needle scopes and micro instruments that we can do really modified procedures in the office. I'm not sure how safe those are and how effective they are, but there's a lot of coding involved and there's a lot of reimbursement involved that incentivizes people to do that.
Yeah.
I think in orthopedics, you're going to see more and more non-orthopedists doing those kind of procedures, because a pain management guy who their job, and I don't mean this in a negative, their job is sticking needles in things. That's what they do, right? And they're good at it.
Right.
So they're going to say, well, why can't I stick a needle scope in somebody's shoulder?
Yeah.
And I know I'm good with needles, and then I can do a debridement with another instrument. That's kind of what they do in the spine a little bit. Yeah. So I think there's going to be a lot of those procedures shifting into office settings, or maybe being done in ASCs. And I think that...
But not requiring the same people that are necessarily doing them right now, or the same equipment.
But I think that, I don't know, and we have to be careful with who does them.
Yeah,
you know, and not, you know, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I started doing open rotator cuff repairs and learned how to do them arthroscopically, and I think I'm pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. And now I can do a lot of stuff with a needle scope. So is a guy... just because he's good with a needle, is he a good orthopedist? I don't know the answer to that, but I think a lot of that stuff is going to move out. What stuff is going to be done in ASCs now? I think we're going to see more and more complicated procedures, spine procedures, joint replacements, because we're getting better and better at managing them postoperatively and getting them out faster. so that they're not spending. They used to spend 7 to 10 days in the hospital, total hip replacements, totally. Now most of them go home the next day from the hospital, and the ones that are done in ASCs, they don't even stay 23 hours anymore. They go home in a few hours because we manage their post-op pain. So I think as we're getting better and better at that, and we're learning all these multimodal pain techniques, that we're not using opioids.
Right.
And so we're getting those patients, and the technology is getting better and better, that we can do more complicated things and use a lot of interesting equipment, but more quickly and more, more efficiently. We used to do, when we did rotator cuff repairs, we had to drill holes in the bone, and now we use anchors. Well, that saves a tremendous. So the more and more we're getting adjunctive equipment, the faster things can be done, the better they can be done, and the more they become amenable to be done in an ASC.
So we're in the middle of, John Van Valkenburg, our president, was talking earlier about how a year ago, we weren't talking about an anesthesia crisis necessarily. We're talking about some anesthesia challenges. And, within the last 12 months, now it's become a crisis. How do you think that's going to affect what's going on in orthopedic?
I think that what the ASCs will find is anesthesia extenders. Nurse anesthetists,
even
nurse practitioners, PAs,
and RN starting to do lower level procedures.
So I think that I think, as with everything else, I think it's a challenge that will be met. I think that it will allow us to do what we're going to see is a lot more cases being done with regional anesthesia and sedation rather than general anesthesia. Right. So because it can be managed by a non-anesthesiologist, or you'll have an anesthesiologist going from room to room, starting them off and not monitoring. And I think the monitoring is going to get better. Maybe they can all be monitored from one spot instead of sitting in the room. I just made that up.
I know. Well, it's a fascinating point.
So I think that we'll see. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Well, and to your point, those are the types of conversations we need to have. We've actually been talking on the podcast is, what can we do with our national audience to bring people together. We've been talking about doing a medical directors conference, and we're planning one in 2025. But there's so many conversations that should be facilitated among doctors who are in leadership positions in a surgery center. That there isn't a convenient thing of place to do that right now. We're going to engage,
And as I said, I think that's the beauty of surgery centers, where everybody has a voice, and I think a lot of doctors think they're good managers and they're not, and I may be one of those. But I also think that there are guys like myself who like to get involved in these kind of conversations, and it's a matter of identifying those guys and finding places to use them.
And brainstorming. Bringing back those brainstorming instead of having preconceived notions about things. Those are the types of things we need to facilitate.
And having teams. All the stakeholders need to be involved, so they can each bring their own perspective and brainstorm it and find a place where everything works for everybody, or everything works for nobody.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, I'm passionate about the industry. You and I spoke for as much time actually more time than we did before we turned the microphone on here. And I'd be glad to have you back. We got to talk again. There's so many other things we can talk about on the podcast.
Anytime, I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And I really does get to, there's a conversation tomorrow about leadership. And we have a lot of challenges in leadership right now in the industry. And part of our problem is that so often, and I'm a former administrator, you know what I mean? And I work, my family is all nurses, we work with a lot of nurses. And we have all these leadership conversations that are going on, but we're not always able to engage with the doctors. They got a lot going on. You got a lot going on, but there are people like you who I think could be those leaders that we can talk about. Not to be
political, but I heard Pete Buttigieg interviewed on a show, and they asked him, why do you go on Fox News all the time?
Yeah.
And again, not political. He said, because if I only talk to people that agree with me, I'm wasting my time.
That's right.
So I think that doctors, they want to talk to people that agree with them all the time.
Yeah.
I think if I can talk to people that don't know what I know and help them see what I see, maybe not even agree with me. Understanding is never the same as agreeing.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think we've lost sight of that. And so I think if we learn to understand doctors, nurses, administrators, all understand each other's perspective, not necessarily agree, but understand it, we build a stronger model.
And have a safe environment for them to do that so that they can feel that they can open up and not be
at the end of the day,
criticized.
it's about caring for the patients.
Yeah.
And the only way we can do that is by seeing it from every angle.
That's right. And that sounds like a good way to end. Thank you so much, Doctor. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
And next, John talked to Mary Ryan about developing the next generation of ASC leaders.
And Mary and I are very good friends. We actually were on the speaking tour for quite a long time, speaking to groups about the CASC exam prep courses through the ASC Association. And actually, for those of you that are interested, we're going to be doing it for the upcoming Outpatient Surgery Magazine conference in October. So let's listen to Mary.
I'm here at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference. We're in Albany, New York at the Desmond, and I'm here with my dear friend, Mary Ryan. Mary and I have known each other for a long time. We spent a lot of time on the podium together, especially with the CASC review courses over the years, and I'm so... you unfortunately had to bow out last year. You had a family emergency, and you came back. I invited you back for a different topic this year on something that you and I are just absolutely passionate about, and that's leadership. So welcome. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having faith in me and bringing me back. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've been very impressed with your conference. I mean, very well put together, excellent speakers. And really what I've been really impressed about is your ability to really bring the group together and talk about state-specific issues.
Right.
You guys have a lot of them to
that's
talk
right.
about, right?
New York is a unique state, though. You have a unique state, too. So, I mean, everybody.
We do, exactly. But on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Right, exactly.
So, that in of itself, leads to different leadership styles and things like that. So my background, I'm a nurse. I've been in the perioperative services environment my whole career, could never go and work on the floor or work back in a hospital or health system. Absolutely love this industry. I think that there are some incredible people that really helped us to grow this industry for all the right reasons. We're taking really great care of our patients. We're helping to keep costs down. We're getting people involved that are passionate about the care that they deliver and doing the right thing for the right reasons.
And tell us what state you're from.
Yep, I'm from Iowa.
I know that's important. Yeah, talk about differences. You're in New York versus Iowa, but it's so funny, isn't it true when you come out to these different states that even though we're in very different environments, some of the problems that we encounter are the same.
Absolutely agree. The whole challenge that we're all facing right now is how do we really get good leaders? How do we encourage good leaders to step up to the plate? Internal candidates, what can we do to help them take the next step? Or, what are we doing to create a barrier for them to say, are you kidding me? I don't want any part of that job after what I see you go through.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So it's how we show up as leaders that really sets the stage for our next generation.
Well, and the turnaround that we're experiencing right now, companies like Ambulatory Care Strategies, we're in the business right now because you can't find leaders that have that regulatory background. And if you find somebody that's strong in leadership, that's actually more important than knowing things like what the regulations are. You can hire people to help you with that, but being a good leader and getting people to be passionate about the job and being truly supportive. One thing I've always said, and I know you and I have talked about this, is that a leader isn't in charge of people. Leader works for those people.
Yeah, I mean, we inspire the people.
Yes.
And, who knows better than about processes and policies than the teammates on the front line that are living that every day.
Right.
So tap into those resources and ask for ideas. What do you guys think about this? Does this make sense? Is this what we're doing? Or what could we do differently or better? You are not the be-all, end-all. You do not have to have all the answers. Surround yourself with really great, smart people, and everybody wins.
It's so funny. One of the unique things about New York's conference is that there are quite a number of surgery centers that bring 2, 3, 4 people. One of our surgery centers from Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, they have their 4 top leadership people here. And I joke with them, I said, who's running the shop? And I know them well. And they say, I'm not worried. I got great charge nurses. I'm on the phone here. I'm only a phone call away if something happens. That's the sign of good leaders, is when you can leave without having anybody be worried that the place is going to fall apart.
Absolutely. And when you do leave, not spend the whole conference on the phone putting out fires, right? So they're handling it back home. And what an incredible legacy for those leaders to leave behind. And think of the growth that they're helping to promote within their organization. And that really, again, is another sign of helping develop the next generation of leaders.
So, this is a question that you and I have talked a little bit about this before. By the way, we talk a lot, especially when we're getting ready for a conference and things like that. So, but I've always been fascinated by the question. People sometimes get confused between the difference between a manager and a leader, and then with that is can a manager be trained to be a manager? Can a leader be trained to be a leader? Or it's almost like, is this a genetic thing? And there's quite a bit of debate in the industry. I'm looking at it, probably asked the question she was horrified that she was going to be asked. But step in on it. What do you think of that?
Yeah. So actually, it's part of my presentation.
Oh, good.
I'm like, that age-old debate. Are we born with it, or can we learn it? And, I'm here to tell you, I am not near smart enough to pick a side on that, as there's a ton of stuff out there on that. But what I can tell you is that we as leaders, really need to be lifelong learners and able to hone our skills. And I tell you, I learn each and every day, every time I'm out there working with different leaders, working with different teammates. And I focus on things that I know that I do really well, but I also then kind of hone in on and try to practice those things that I know that I can do better at. And so, you talk about the whole, leader versus manager, dilemma. We all know managers are known for GSD, getting stuff done. Right. And leaders really are about inspiring and helping people to take the next step and not be afraid to bring forward ideas and feel safe in an environment where they can grow and prosper, and we can really create an environment that we can take really great care of our patients. So, a lot of us, I think that I'm a combination of both, because it really is, we need people to help us to stay on track and get things done, right? But you also need that cheerleader and that hurrah and that celebration when things are going well, or that little nudge to say, we can do this, So.
Well, and throughout your career, you're going to change. Like I was the guy got things done. I thought I was a good manager, and then then the skills were there to move into leadership. And then to your point, for a while I was in between. I have a wonderful staff. I had 27 employees. I don't have to actually do any work anymore, and that's my joke. But thank goodness I have great managers out there that are in charge of that, because I would not, have the company I have now, have the resources we have now without the people that actually do. And I hope that people get that message that you need both in your organization. You need a good leader, and if you don't have a leader, you're going to have to find some way to find somebody that's going to be able to step up and do that.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
So what's the big message that you want our audience to take away? You haven't done the speech yet, a little bit later today. So what's the biggest message you think that comes out of it?
Being a leader is really a privilege.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And we need to make sure that during our servant leader legacy, that we have provided an opportunity for our staff to have a great environment that starts with culture. Culture starts with you, right? So how you show up to work every day impacts your team, impacts the outcomes that we have. Our patients trust us to take care of them. And so as a leader, how are you going to create an environment that we can deliver the best possible care and encourage our teams to be the best that they can possibly be?
You made a point earlier, which is so important. And my dear friend, Ann Geyer, and I know you knew Ann. Ann's retired. She was with us until the end there. And she has left a legacy for all of us in the leadership area, and taught a lot of us in that.
And speaking. Oh my gosh.
And her point is that I will never stop learning. Now I don't have as much contact with her today as I did when she was here, but I can guarantee you that she still watching the news. She's still reading the journals, even though she's not actively speaking. Talk a little bit about lifelong learning and how important it is to step up. And we're from a political standpoint right now, we have a situation where people are encouraged to have one opinion and only one opinion and never change that opinion. What's your observation about that in leadership?
Your job as a leader isn't to import your ideas on the teammates that you work with. It really is to help them develop and create their own thoughts about how things could be or should be.
Right.
I'm a huge believer of not surrounding yourself with people that are like you.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people that think differently, because it's only going to make your organization stronger. It's going to challenge you and help you become a better leader and a better learner. I think being able to give opportunities for your teammates to be lifelong learners. Are there certifications out there that your teammates can take? What's it going to take for you to move the barriers to help them be successful and get a certification as in the CAPE or as in the CASC? Are you the administrator? What's your bench strength for when you leave that position, if be retiring or an extended illness? How have you prepared your leaders to step into that role so that there's not chaos within your organization? How proactive are you to be able to continue that successful path that your facility is on?
You're touching on one of those areas that I'm most concerned. As a surveyor, I sometimes encounter, it seems to be happening a little bit more frequently than in the past, where I go into an organization and they had a long-term administrator, a long-term director of nursing, and they had been very successful. And then I meet the new person that's taken over, and they're struggling because they were never mentored, or that leader, and I put air quotes around it, kept everything very close to themselves. They kept everything almost secret. Because I'm talking a little about the ego side of that and the dangers of that type of leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece to that, we've just had an experience with a client that called us where their leader of a couple of years was leaving for another opportunity outside the organization. And so they were appointing their nurse manager as the interim administrator. And she had no clue about credentialing and HR files and she's never been to a governing
body meeting.
Yeah. And what the expectations were there. And never held those responsibilities, didn't really understand any of the standards and wasn't taught. And it wasn't that the leader that was in there in place historically had been, on an ego trip. She felt like she was protecting her team.
That's a good point.
And going to take that badge of honor, and I will take care of all this. You just concentrate on taking care of our patients and, leading the clinical team. I will do everything else. Well, what did that do? Huge gap, huge learning curve. This person has been doing a tremendous job in that role, but every day is a learning day, let me tell you. And, happy for us that we were able to come in and help support her and help guide her. So there's another thing to think about. Don't be don't carry that badge of honor and say, I'll do it all for you. Because what kind of an example are you setting for the team too?
That's right. And leader. Well, and you make a very good point there, is it's not always the ego driven, like I implied, but it could very well be, I just don't want to burden other people with my problem, or I'm afraid that if I give them one more thing to do, they're going to leave. And that brings me to another point is surgery centers don't have those professional pathways that a lot of large organizations do, independent ones at least. So you reach that, the top of the organization, and you probably aren't going to go somewhere other than to another organization or back to a hospital or things like that. And we often find ourselves in positions where we spend a lot of resources bringing people up in the organization and lose them. Perhaps because we just, didn't find some opportunity for them. So I'm of two minds here. One is, it doesn't matter whether that person can stay with you forever, because you already have other people in that position. Your job is to make sure that they succeed. And maybe that's not going to be in your own organization.
No, absolutely agree with that sentiment. And, do the right thing for the right reasons.
That's right.
And
That's
it's
right.
not about the position, it's about the people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That we lead and helping them be successful and helping them take the next step and step outside of their comfort zone. And sometimes that does have a negative impact on your organization. However, if you've done it right, you've got bench strength back there.
That's right.
That you're also mentoring, leading, coaching, and bringing along so that someone else can have an opportunity, and, we live in a crazy environment today where, a lot of our younger generation is not as loyal as they used to be in the position. So we don't see long-term employees like we used to in administrator roles. But good golly, I'm here to tell you that there are challenges each and every day, whether you choose to accept them or not. It is harder and harder to be a leader today because we expect so much more of them. So, I think our plates are full. And we can always look for opportunities to do things a little bit differently, more efficiently. Just because we've always done it this way doesn't make it right. Many ways, to get the job done.
Lastly, we talk about the importance of education, of ongoing being a lifelong learner. What do you think are opportunities, at least in the ASC industry, for that type of education, and where people should be, where they should be attending conferences and things like that?
So fortunately, in that arena, we've seen a lot of growth. Historically, you were kind of oriented, by doing it or relying on your leader who put you in that place to help you get you oriented. There are some fantastic resources out there, John. Your group obviously is leading, as far as your boot camps and, helping to get education out there for leaders and directors of nursing and infection prevention, administrators and quality, that kind of stuff. I mean, there are tons of opportunities out there if you go out there and look. There's all kinds of things through, some of our organizations.
Yeah. Well, you and I are going to be speaking. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
You can remember the dates. I can't remember the date.
The end of October, actually. So, So,
And I'll put a reference to we're doing an upcoming session in cooperation with ARN and with the outpatient group. So I'll put a reference in there. And so if you want to hear us speak more, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah. But, look to your state associations.
Yes.
Look to ASCA. Right. There's a mentoring program through ASCA to help develop,
leaders,
next generation leaders. You guys, again, do a fantastic job there and always looking for opportunities to help develop, materials managers. I mean, there's just a lot of ways if you get out there on the internet and start surfing. But, the certifications, the CASC and CAPE, there is a ton of resources and literature out there on those websites as
it doesn't have to be expensive.
It doesn't. Right. It doesn't. A lot of it is just links, to pages and, getting a deeper understanding of, the state operations manual and the different appendixes. And, it starts there for a lot of positions.
And don't forget the free podcast that you're now listening to. Obviously, listeners out there, is that this is a good way to at least keep up with things and, of course, get to hear great interviews with people that really are leaders in the industry. Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate your time.
Most certainly. Thank you so much for getting to chat today.
And then one of the things that we did this year is we decided to bring in speakers from other states, people that were high up in the organization or on the board of directors or executive directors, to talk about what is going on in some other states and how that might spread nationwide. We spoke to John Van Valkenburg from the New York State Association, Ellen Rostron, who is from the Massachusetts ASC Association, Beth LeBoyer, our good friend from the California Ambulatory Surgery Center Association, and Krista Durapau, who is with the Texas Ambulatory Surgery Center Association. So let's listen.
I'm here at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference. We're in the Desmond Hotel here in beautiful Albany, New York, and I'm here with John Van Valkenburg.
Krista Durapau.
And, of course,
Beth LeBoyer.
Beth LeBoyer from California. And we just finished a wonderful conversation about what's going on throughout the rest of the country. And John and Jeffrey, kind of decided we wanted to have that national perspective, from people that are experiencing things that might very well end up in New York. And I thought for our national audience, too, that this is a good conversation. Be prepared. And of course, Krista, Beth, John, from really big states, that tend to set the tone for a lot that's going on. So I thought I would start with first of all, John, why did you want this to happen, and what do you see in New York that you think that we're worried about might propagate from other states?
Thank you, and thank you to Beth and Krista for coming to our conference. This is something that we've that we have wanted to do for the last several years, and that's get some other states involved in our conference, but also to be able to have a session like that where we can discuss what is going on in other states, because these things, you see it. You see a bill introduced in one state, and then next thing you know, it's introduced in several other states. And it helps us keep an eye on things, what's happening out there in the environment, but also learn from others. What did you struggle with? What arguments that you made for or against some pieces of legislation were effective, to help learn from that and to be able to collaborate. So really, really happy that we're able to put this together this year, and really thankful that they were able to attend.
Well, it's very well received by the audience. A lot of great questions out there. Krista, both of you scared me. But Krista, something going on in Texas. Of course, I was aware of it, but you talked to it very succinctly. Can you talk about the major challenge that you feel that's facing Texas right now, and of course that could very well spread too?
Sure, and it has spread across other states, and bills have been filed, and some bills have successfully exempted ASCs from facility fee legislation, and then some have not. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we watch very closely in Texas, and kind of dovetailed with the facility fee issue is price transparency. Yeah. And what will price transparency for ASCs look like in the next session?
So, and there is a concern with regard to the actual facility fee too.
There is a concern with regard to discussions about facility fee restrictions, and we work very hard to educate our legislature about what a facility fee for an ASC means and is, and how it's different than other healthcare facilities.
It's one of those classic unintended consequences. I think the people that are proposing these things don't understand the ramifications. Somebody from the audience, said, "Well, what does this really mean to us?" And of course, the point was made. There's only one revenue source. I think it was John, actually. What was it that you were suggesting?
Selling ice cream.
Selling ice cream, right? which in some cases probably be much more profitable than doing the surgery. But that's a scary thought. I mean, and that's what I want to get across to our audience here is that's the only source of revenue we have, and if you've got to make it would be.
Mention that there's already price cuts, and then reimbursement rates continually go down,
right? And
then supplies and staff go up. So as people talk about removing a facility fee, absolutely devastating for the industry.
About a year ago, we started to recognize that there was an anesthesia problem. I think we called it a problem at the time, or an anesthesia issue. And then, John, you were commenting, during the session that shortly after this conference last year, you actually started, your own ambulatory surgery center had a situation where you had to find a new anesthesia provider, or thought you were going to have to find a new anesthesia. And then by January of this year, we were starting to use the term, crisis. So, and one of the possible solutions to this is CRNAs. We know in New York and in Texas, CRNAs are not allowed to practice independently. And Beth, your state is one of those opt-in states. And there's only, I can't remember the number right now, but it's about half of the states are opt-in and opt-out. Can you, first of all, explain to our audience what that means, and then second, talk about that experience and how that is helping or how it's affecting your anesthesia situation in California?
Sure. And thank you, John and John, for having me in New York. It's been delightful. So Governor Schwarzenegger, so that's been several years ago, gave CRNAs in California the ability to opt out, which means that they can practice without direct supervision. However, that also means that there needs to be an order for anesthesia. So there's been a little bit of confusion lately, and the California Department of Public Health just released an AFL, which was really helpful. And my feedback from not only the CRNAs, but the anesthesiologists, that it's been super helpful giving direction. And essentially, CRNAs can practice without supervision in California. Definitely have to go through a facility's credentialing process and governance and be approved and all of those things. And then I think the one caveat would be that the physician needs to write the order for anesthesia and its related medications. And it can be as simple as that, anesthesia and its related medications is approved by the facility. And our interpretation is that's best practice for regardless of who your anesthesia provider is. Right. So it does open access to care to be able to use CRNAs. However, we're still filling, even having that ability to utilize CRNAs in the capacity we have. There still is a shortage in California and an issue that's being addressed daily by our centers.
What do you think, again, a question open to all of you, what do you think is... what are some of the major initiatives that you're doing in your state, in addition to what we're doing with the CRNAs, to try to solve or to mitigate this anesthesia situation?
So I would say anecdotally in Texas, there is a push to retain anesthesiologists. If they're looking at retirement, there is a push to keep them on for a couple more years for more medical students to graduate and get into the process. I will say that we have tremendous studies and monies going towards nursing workforce and to help nurses get out of school faster, fast track, and get into the different healthcare facilities.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's complicated, right? Because and I think in New York State they're trying to address that, trying to retain more doctors, more nurses, get more trained. But the issue is the infrastructure isn't there. There's not enough nursing schools. There's not enough. There's just not enough out there to be able to get the throughput that's needed to fix some of these staffing issues. And then there's, unfortunately, talk about unintended consequences. There's things working against that. For example, the Grieving Families Act in New York, like that. It has an unintended consequence. That's a bill that's been introduced the last several years. It was introduced again this year. We are really hoping for a veto, but what it's doing is it's driving physicians out of the state, anesthesia and otherwise. So that's
driving insurance rates through the roof.
Correct. The liability insurance, increased liability is increased premiums, and then it's going to drive more of those doctors out of the state. So that's work. It's great that they're having efforts to try and recruit and retain and train more of these providers, but there's also things that are driving them away. That's working counter to that goal. So, I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew.
We really don't have a solution yet.
There is no solution. I think part of it might be, and again, is reimbursement is a big issue for anesthesia. It's an interesting that anesthesia provider, they can't, because they're so necessary to surgery, they can get subsidies, and the hospital's been doing it for a while, and now, or stipends or whatever you want to call them, and now surgery centers are having to do it. But in reality, the way we're reimbursed, there's not enough money in there to account for also having to pay these subsidies. So it creates a big problem for surgery centers, and the whole business model, to be honest with you, it's kind of been shifted quite a bit. So I don't know, but we're going to continue to monitor it and see what we can do. Again, I think the ultimate goal is there needs to be more providers.
Right.
Obviously, that's very difficult to do.
And
overnight.
It's not something that can happen overnight.
Correct.
A late arrival here. Ellen was a little late in trying to check out here. Unfortunately, it's been a very hectic last minute. So thank you for Ellen Rostrom joining us from Massachusetts Association. First of all, introduce yourself, Ellen.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. I'm the treasurer of the State Association in Massachusetts, and I came here today because Greg DeConcilis was supposed to be here and clearly overbooked himself.
Yeah, right.
So he asked me to come, and it was a great experience. I really loved meeting everybody. It's a great association, and I've really enjoyed my time here.
Thank you so much. And we're a big supporter of, all of your associations, but Massachusetts is right next door to me. So I know you and Greg very well, obviously, and have attended your conferences for years. So you popped in at the tail end of this anesthesia conversation. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with anesthesia in ASCs in the state of Massachusetts?
Well, I'm not really certain how it's working for all the other associations.
Right.
At our association, we still have a staff of anesthesiologists that recently had to join a bigger company to support their staffing issues. So that's what we're dealing with, but fortunately it's the same group of doctors that we've had at our center for many years, so we're all very comfortable with each other. And with that being said, it's a great question to bring back to the members to see how they're dealing with it and if they're running into any of the same circumstances where there's, the provider shortages causing their doctors to jump on board with a management group to support their salaries. So it's just an interesting challenge these days.
So, Ellen, to kind of shift topics, you mentioned some of the legislation that's coming down. Again, these are proposals right now. But one that was kind of interesting, I think, to all of us that were listening was about the private equity and what's going on. Can you describe a little bit about that? Because let's preface this because not everybody might know this, but private equity is starting to play it's always played a role, but I've seen in the last couple of years an increase in the private equity. We actually have clients, private equity companies that hire amateur healthcare strategies to be their regulatory wing because they don't know what's going on. But there's a lot of strong opinions about private equity. Right. Tell us what's going on in Massachusetts.
Right. So I think that they took the opportunity at the state level to launch off of the recent Steward healthcare crisis, which was an unfortunate situation where the hospitals and their surrounding facilities went bankrupt. And then all of a sudden there was this bill being pushed to restrict, the Senate wants to restrict the use of private equity firms at the ASC level and also curtail the physician office management organization. They're a freestanding physician group. And so fortunately, with the assistance of Rana, who works for us at the state level, and Greg, of course, they kept an eye on that and it did not pass. But we've noticed trends where just because it doesn't pass, I think it just gives them more juice in the next session to bring it back to life. So it is concerning because private equity can provide a resource
capital
to the facilities that need that push. It could be to help the physicians stay independent from a hospital merger.
Right.
So it provides a resource while still maintaining the facility as an ASC, which is a benefit to the community and the cost.
Yeah.
So I think there's a benefit for them, and I don't think it should be at the government level to say that they're not welcome in the state.
Yeah. So, Krista, anything else going on in Texas as we finish up here? Anything else going on in Texas that we should be keeping an eye on, or what are the things that are concerning your members?
So I would say price transparency and facility fees, as we discussed earlier, are kind of the biggest threats to the industry. I will also say that our Texas legislature is taking a hard look at AI and how that will penetrate through healthcare and what those results will happen. And then we have some of the common issues that other states have: surgical smoke evacuation, things like that. So, yeah.
In California, we watch California carefully here in New York. Our states look a lot more alike than they're different, even though we have completely different weather. So what's going on in California I need to be worried about?
Well, to build on Ellen, we have a bill on the governor's desk for private equity, and where the attorney general would have to provide any approval of any merger acquisition that had private equity in it. So we're hoping for a veto on that bill.
It would definitely complicate, any type of transactions that are going on.
Yeah.
And change the price structure for those transactions too.
We feel like there's already that oversight through the California OCA, Office of Healthcare Affordability in California, who is already looking at mergers and and transactions.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a duplicative.
Which we find a lot in legislation that's out there.
Right.
John Van Valkenburg, unfortunately, had to leave. We got a lot going on here as we finish up our conference. I do want to thank all of you for, first of all, coming to New York and our beautiful, because it's a good time of year, Beth, to come up here.
That's lovely.
I go to your place, California in the wintertime, so and Texas too, by the way. Massachusetts, sorry, you got the same weather I do. But we have a lot going on right now, and I really appreciate your taking the time to come here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
And next, John spoke with Penny Smalley, RN, about surgical smoke evacuation.
Now, Penny and I really hit it off during the conference. She's
so nice.
She is. She's quite a good speaker. She was a little bit nervous in talking at first, and then I could see that she's just a natural at this sort of thing, and she just did a fantastic job with her speaker. By the way, all of our speakers were really great. I wish I could have gotten a couple more. There were we got as many as we could during the conference. But Penny is experienced in a lot of areas, and she actually got into the discussion about smoke evacuation through her experience with laser safety. So let's listen to this interview, and I suspect, Sue, that Penny will be back in future episodes.
So I'm at the 2024 New York State Association of Ambulatory Surgery Centers annual conference here in Albany, New York. I'm here with my new friend, Penny Smalley. So many times I interview people I've known for years, but Penny and I have quickly become good friends here. We have a lot in common, and certainly you have so much experience. Penny was here to talk about smoke evacuation, and that's what we'll focus on here. But you'll be back on a podcast, I'm pretty sure, talking about some of the other things. So Penny, introduce yourself and what you've been doing for the last couple decades.
Thanks so much, John. I'm really happy to be here. I was very pleased with the invitation. And I have not only enjoyed sharing my ideas, but learning from all of the other speakers and the people that have attended this conference. It's been great.
Thank you.
So thank you again to the organization for having me here.
Sure. So what do you do?
I am a self-employed, independent perioperative nurse consultant.
Okay.
I have been running my business as such since the late 1980s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I have worked with most of the medical product companies.
Yeah.
I've done so many different things. My business is basically a potpourri of nursing and medical consultation. I've worked with feasibility studies in industry. I have done a lot of education and training.
Yeah.
My area of expertise and sort of my home nest where I came from is OBGYN and laser technology. That's where it all got started.
Right.
And that's where I was introduced to the risks and hazards of surgical plume, which has been my favorite cause over the many decades.
Well, and our dear friend, Deb Spratt, Deb Spratt, former president of AORN, she and I, actually, I don't know if you knew this, but she and I started a surgery center in 1989, 1990 together. And that's how that was her first surgery center, my first surgery center, and we learned so much together. And we've kept in touch over the years. But this has been one of her passions, especially in her time with AORN. And I know you've worked with her, but this has been a mission of AORN. And, of course, many of the other organizations, state associations, too. And I don't know if you know this, but I helped working with the New York State Association to push through the legislation here in New York, because we did really feel that it was something to the benefit. Even now, I think some of our centers are a little frustrated with the fact that we pushed this through, because, as I'm sure you're going to talk about, there is misinformation out there, miscommunication, and it's a complex area. One way we certainly can't cover in 15 minutes, but I'm going to force you to kind of do the best you can on that. So tell us, first of all, really a background on this, because not everybody not all of our listeners are actually going to truly understand what it is and how dangerous it is.
Right. So back in the very early 1980s, in fact, our first center where we had lasers introduced us to the need for smoke evacuation, because it was unlike anything else. So the laser companies actually sold or gave smoke evacuation equipment along with every laser that was purchased back then, because they recognized that it didn't smell good.
Yeah.
A lot of it in ambulatory or even in doctors' offices, the patients were gagging and choking and not feeling well. And we knew that it was bad. We had no evidence. We had no research.
Yeah.
We had nothing to prove why it was bad, but we all knew it was. Personally, I had an allergy attack the first time I worked in a room with a laser. And so that sort of helped me to understand that this was a problem. Right. So gradually, the company started sponsoring research studies or quasi-research studies.
Yeah.
And it was sort of ignored by and large by the medical community because it was all commercially biased.
Yeah.
And so, again, there was no really good evidence behind it. And it's gone through a lot of ups and downs and plateaus. But what really helped was in the mid to late 1980s when we started getting public messaging about smoking.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everybody understood that smoke was bad for them.
In whatever form.
It was. And so it was equivalent to the backyard barbecue and, everything else that produced smoke. What they didn't understand back then that we do understand now is the fact that it isn't really smoke.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The hazard is the plume, which is the diffusion of all this material. So going back just a step, smoke plume, if you want to call it that, is created when you use any energy-based device. So that's a photothermal laser. Not all lasers create plume. All the electrosurgical devices, RF devices, ultrasonic devices, harmonic scalpels, plasma generators, all of these new technologies that create heat is absorbed into the cells, creates an expansion and finally a disruption of individual cells, which emits all of the material that's in there. So the hazard exists because of the release of all this material that's in the cells.
Yeah.
And that's bacteria and virus and heavy metals, drugs, dyes, whatever happens to be in the cell is now airborne.
The very reason that you took it out in the first place is now you're spreading it out.
And so the risk then is the diffusion of all of that material into the breathing zones of people present in the room, including our patients. So that is really what the hazard is, what multiple hazards are.
Right.
And we're mostly concerned about the transmission of virus, obviously.
Yeah.
The bacteria are larger particles, aerosolized blood and tissue fragments are also a hazard, but not nearly as much as the hazards of HIV and possibly SARS-CoV-2.
So what do we do? What's the solution? Well, let's start with the legislation. Okay. I know you studied the legislation in New York. Just talk in general about the legislative efforts that are going on, because most of the legislation that's showing up in the states are very similar across those states where those occur.
It is to a certain degree, but
true.
I do want to give a plug for Illinois because that's my home base.
Yeah.
I actually, with one of my colleagues, developed a grassroots coalition. We did not use lobbyists. We did not use AORN or any of the other organizations working on this legislation. We wrote letters to the governor, who then sent it to several senators because he's really supportive of health. And after this letter writing campaign, I received a call from our local senator, who said, "This is really interesting. I'll sponsor that bill."
Wow.
And I became familiar with her, and we worked together with her office. My colleague and I wrote all the testimony. We delivered all the testimony at all the committee meetings. And in 9 months, we got a bill passed. And our bill is slightly different because we have a regulatory component, and that's the issue. When you have a bill, that's the legislation, but it doesn't tell you how to comply with it.
Right.
And so what I've been urging people to do is to contact departments of health or whatever agency has become nominated as the regulatory or compliance arm, and to ask for good criteria for compliance, because otherwise people don't know what to do. They have a bill, but they don't know how to comply with it.
Well, that's very good. Let me take that a little bit back because it's so important to understand that like in the case of the regulations that CMS imposes on surgery centers, we have the conditions for coverage, but they don't give you enough detail in that to know how to actually do it. That's where the legislation, where the regulations come in and take it a step further.
And that goes back to what you originally said. There's so many people that are out there. You have a bill, but you don't know basically what to do with it.
What to do with it,
So it's our job, us being in the fortunate position of being able to reach out to a lot of different healthcare facilities and organizations to get policy, individual policy in each facility. And I always tell people this is not a laser policy. It's a standalone policy and procedures that apply to any energy-based device,
Right.
and you can always exceed the law. You
Yeah.
have to meet minimal requirements,
Right.
which is in the New York law to have and adopt and implement
Yeah.
a policy. But the criteria for that policy needs to exceed that statement.
Right.
And so you look to standards to inform your policy. So we tell people to go to the American National Standards Institute.
Yeah.
There is an ISO standard. I'm sure most listeners are familiar with ISO and IEC standards.
Right.
They both have a lot of recommendations. The ISO standard 16571 is the only standard in the world that is specific to plume evacuation, and it sets up all of the specifications for the equipment. So if you're looking at what do I have to buy, or what does my equipment have to look like, that's the standard to look for. And then there's an appendix in that standard that has a lot of good talking points that can be used to develop policy. And there are a number of other things like that. But there's resources out there to help you establish the criteria in the facilities that will allow for not just compliance, but in excess of compliance. Good best practice.
So this is a special episode that's for New York State centers. Can you talk a little bit about what that impact has been on New York State, which just implemented? Talk a little bit about quickly about the history.
Well, first of all, it's raised awareness tremendously.
Yeah.
And, we ask for hands up in classes, how many people have this equipment?
Yeah.
Most people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
The issue becomes, do we use it every day on every case in every room?
Right.
And that's...
And does everybody know how to use it too?
No, and
Yeah,
that's
right.
the gap. So again, looking to the companies for in-servicing,
Yeah.
operational in-servicing, but they need the education behind it.
Yeah.
And I think organizations such as this one have an opportunity to develop more and I guess more standardized educational programs that people can utilize. But certainly when they contact the state organizations, because now we have a law, what do we do?
Yeah.
Then you have that opportunity to help provide them with some resources behind that.
How difficult is it for a surgery center to really implement this type of a system? If somebody's new to it or is not familiar with it, or know there's a system back there but doesn't know what it does. I mean, that happens a lot. I, as an administrator, I wouldn't know what that is. I would rely upon my nurse manager. But we have a lot of people coming into the industry right now that aren't even from the operating room, like perioperative nurses, that aren't even familiar with all this, that are in leadership positions that are trying to put these things together. So how difficult is it? What resources might be available to them?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
There are a lot of resources out there. The equipment is simple to use. You don't have to be a nurse to be able to learn you can learn to operate it in about 30.
So you're kind of saying that even somebody like me might.
John,
I could.
And in fact, I can show you in 37 seconds how to operate this equipment.
That's interesting.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
So as far as a burden goes, it's not.
Yeah.
As far as financially, you can get evacuation systems depending on what your needs are.
Right.
For $1,000 or for $10,000. The equipment is not heavy capital equipment. It requires consumable contracts because you do have a number of disposable pieces that go with it, tubing and filters, etc. But if you first do a baseline risk assessment in your facility, how many procedures do you do with energy-based devices? And then you establish how many cases can you do on a filter, because it's the filters that are the most expensive part.
Yeah.
But that allows you to choose the level of equipment you need. It has to be portable because it will go from one side of the table to the other, and you have to be able to move it around, so it can't be a big footprint in the room, obviously.
Yeah.
There are built-in systems if you're in the process of remodeling or building a new ASC. There are actually central evacuation systems that can be included in the architecture, and it's inside behind the walls. So there's nothing in the room but a tubing. There's everything from these little handheld devices up until that completely central system, and everything in between. So it's easy. There are a lot of companies out there that produce this equipment, but I encourage people, when you start looking at the companies bringing in equipment for trials, it's the ESU pencils that often may be the make or break for a particular piece of equipment. So it's a matter of getting the surgeons involved, if they've used it 5 years ago in another facility, they didn't like it because the equipment was a bit more bulky back then and a bit more uncomfortable to use. So they have a mental image that this is not really something I want. But now the equipment is so much better. There's something for everyone.
Good. So that's a good message out there, is that, and we do recognize that this could be cumbersome in the sense that you're not familiar with the process, but there's a lot of resources that are available to help you get through it.
There certainly are. The standards, the articles that are out there, all they have to do is Google, and you get tons and tons of material. Or you can, contact the companies, and they'll help you out with that.
And just lastly, talking about Google, when you and I, before I actually met you in person, I did a Google search for you, and I was expecting to see all these things about smoke evacuation, and you showed up in research papers and other things like that. So you have been an incredible resource to the industry, and I know you've been around a couple years, like me.
Just a few.
And so just on behalf of an industry, a grateful industry, thank you for so much of the hard work. And you're going to be on the podcast again. Probably next time we're going to talk about lasers.
Well, that would be really good.
Yeah, we just, I was thinking we haven't talked about that on the podcast. So we'll get in touch with you again soon. And probably that's what I'll bring you back next year to talk about at the conference.
I'm ready and willing.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle. If you found this episode informative, we encourage you to share it with your friends and colleagues in the ASC industry. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'd love any feedback about our episodes or any ideas for future episodes. Send us an email at comments@ascpodcast.com.
And we would like to give a special thank you to everybody at the New York State Association and at the Desmond Hotel who were very accommodating during the recording of this special episode. And we'd also like to give a special thank you for our great team here that make this podcast possible. Our sound editor, Sue Cronkite, who had a major job to do this. And again, it's not Sue's fault that we had some problems. It was mine I guess we'll call it user error, Sue, with regard to the equipment. Our executive producer is John Goehle, and our dedicated research team is Sue Cronkite, Jenna Alvarez, Judy D'Ambrosio, Mike D'Ambrosio, Alex Borneman, Zach Caloritis, Jim Masters, Amy Cronkite, Lori Rodericks, Kathy Foti, Donna Macchio, and Christina Norman. We certainly couldn't do it without them. Our music is provided by Media Sushi and Mike Noah, and the ASC Podcast with John Goehle is hosted on Podbean and is available on all major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening. This episode of the ASC Podcast with John Goehle is sponsored by Surgical Information Systems, providing cutting-edge information solutions for surgery providers. Trivalence, offering a comprehensive and next-generation ASC solution that optimizes payment and supply chain performance, enabling actionable data insights. MedServe, which offers the only digital narcotic cabinet specifically designed and priced for surgery centers, helping standardize processes and compliance, eliminate paper logs, and prevent drug diversion. And Ambulatory Healthcare Strategies, which is the nation's leading regulatory and accreditation compliance resource for ambulatory surgery centers. For information about any of our sponsors, please visit our website at ASCPodcast.com. This podcast is an educational and operational tool and is not intended to be a comprehensive resource for all rules, regulations, and standards that an ambulatory surgery center must meet. The advice provided should not be considered as, nor does it constitute legal advice or opinion. When reviewing specific situations involving legal and regulatory issues, attorneys and other professionals should be consulted. This has been a production of Eden Group Development. All rights are reserved. If you're interested in advertising or sponsoring the ASC Podcast with John Goehle, please email us at info@ascpodcast.com. And we'd love to hear your questions and comments. Please email us at comments@ascpodcast.com.